Jonathan, if I remember at the end of the meeting under other business, do you mind if I try to embarrass you for a sentence or two? With praise?
You're talking to Mr. Bolton?
Yes.
Who, me? Oh, boy, I guess not.
What is one of these an extra?
Yeah, I assembled what I brought down and the stuff that was on the table, and then I found the whole one of these sitting here.
Oh, okay.
They printed off 7, 8, and 9 and other business.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I think it's all the text.
Good morning, everybody.
Full attention. Good morning.
I'm sorry I can't be there in person with you, but I didn't want to expose you to COVID.
Oh,
Thank you.
appreciate it. Sorry about that.
Yeah, we'll see if my voice makes it through the meeting.
Well, David already offered the chair.
Oh, that would be great.
Oh, I don't recall that.
I'll cede that happily to David.
No. You're welcome to go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Are we all present and accounted for? It looks like that.
Yes.
I see we have a new commissioner.
Good morning, Beth.
Yes, Commissioner Hearn is here, and we welcome her to the floor.
Sarah?
Good morning.
Good
Morning. Pleased to be here with you, and I'm sorry I as well can't be there in person, but I will next time.
Okay.
Hello,
Actually,
Jonathan.
Okay.
we should have Commissioner Hearn tell us a little bit about herself, so that we all know.
So, oh, I didn't know I was going to do that, but I worked for Maine Conservation Voters. I've been an environmental advocate essentially my whole career, and my last job was with Maine Conservation Voters, and I retired in June. And you know, as an advocate for Maine Conservation Voters, I was a lobbyist. So I filed lobby reports, and we also, Maine Conservation Voters also has a PAC. So we filed PAC reports. So I'm familiar on that end. So I thought that would be useful in this commission. And yeah, I'm happy to be here. So
We're thrilled to
I live
have
in
you.
Freeport. Pardon?
We're thrilled to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for the warm welcome.
Okay, so let's start the meeting. This is the meeting of the Commission on Governmental Ethics and Election Practices on October 30th, 2024. Our first order of business is agenda item 1. It's a ratification of the minutes of the September 25th, 2024 meeting. Would somebody like to make a motion?
I move that we accept the minutes, approve the minutes.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes. I think since we're all over the place, we need to have a roll call vote. So Commissioner Hastings?
Yes.
Commissioner Marble?
Yes.
Commissioner Leclerc?
Yes.
Commissioner Hearn?
Since I wasn't at that meeting, should I vote or should I just abstain?
You can abstain, that's fine.
Yeah, I'll abstain.
Yep, makes sense. I'll vote yes. Moving on to agenda item 2, that's a complaint about long signs without a disclosure statement. Is there anybody here in the room to address this?
Mr. Ducharme, who organized the signs, is here.
Okay, could you ask him to come up to the witness table?
He's not on screen yet, but he's at the table.
Okay, great. Mr. Ducharme, what we usually do is I'll have Mr. Wayne brief us on the facts of this case, and then we'll hear from you and anybody else who wishes to address it, and we'll make a decision. So, Mr. Wayne?
Thank you. This was a complaint brought by Mr. Tom Saviello, who couldn't join us today because he's traveling. And he filed a complaint with us because he's a candidate for county commissioner, and he observed a small number of signs. I think initially it was 2 signs relating to his candidacy that said, "Say no to Saviello." And he also brought our attention to another sign that related to a candidate for the Maine House of Representatives, Stephan Bunker or Stephan Bunker. And what Mr. Saviello brought to our attention is that signs and other campaign materials that are given to voters, shared with voters that advocate for or against an election, they're supposed to state the name and the address of the person who financed the expenditure. And also, if it was independent of the candidates, it should say not paid for or authorized by any candidate. So we contacted Mr. Ducharme, who right away said yes, he was responsible for the signs. And initially there were just 3 that were the subject of the complaint. And within 24 hours, he had gone out and fixed a little message on the signs that was required by law. And then Mr. Saviello brought to our attention, I'm not sure, maybe a week or 10 days, maybe 2 weeks later, another 2 or 3 signs that did not have the disclosure on them. And we got back to Mr. Ducharme about them, and he explained that he no longer had control of these. And he can explain further if he'd like, but I think they were either taken or they were moved or something like that. So once we identified the location to him about these additional 2 or 3 signs, he also got the right disclaimer information on there. So from the staff's point of view, paying for and posting the signs, even though there were just 5 or 6 signs, that is a violation because they didn't indicate who paid for them initially, but he has corrected them. So the commission does have authority under the statute to assess a penalty if it would like. But that's in your discretion, and the statute does contain a sentence that says if the person responsible for the violation does fix the missing disclaimer, the commission may not assess a penalty. So that's what's before the commission, and Mr. Ducharme is here to explain any other circumstances that he'd like.
Okay, Mr. Ducharme, we'll hear from you.
Yes, sir. On September 27th, I got an email saying that I had violated the signs that I put up had violated the disclosure rules, and I was not aware of them when I put them up. Obviously, I immediately took responsibility for them and made the corrections. Did everything that I could as quickly as I could to make sure that I wasn't in violation. Initially, I didn't know that I was doing anything wrong, and then when I found out I did, I moved very quickly to correct it.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Are there any questions from commissioners for Mr. Wayne or Mr. Ducharme?
I'd like to ask Mr. Ducharme a question.
Go ahead.
Have you had any prior experience with campaigns or signs or advocacy or anything like that?
No, this is the first year I've ever really gotten involved as far as that's concerned.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ducharme. Okay, I'll make a motion. We have 2 sets of signs here, so we have 2 potential violations. I'll make a motion that the Saviello signs violated the disclosure requirements of 21 AMRS section 1014-2, and that we assess no penalty. Is there?
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we find a violation for the Saviello signs and that we assess no penalty. Is there discussion amongst commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Leclerc.
Just briefly, probably more for Mr. Wayne. Is there a way for the commission to educate the public more fully? And I understand that that's a big ask, but this gentleman is saying he didn't know, and I'm just wondering before the campaign season start if there's some way for the commission to advise, people that if they're going to do stuff like this, that there's potential, they should be contacting the Ethics Commission to ask what the appropriate way to do it is.
Absolutely. We will review our website to make sure that the advice to the general public is as prominent as it could be. Oftentimes people involved in the public are not active in campaigns. I should mention Mr. Ducharme is somewhat active in a local Republican committee, but they're all the time, they're everyday people who decide they care about a ballot question or candidate election, and so they just undertake this and they don't check, and it's hard to reach those people, but maybe we could be more proactive in the next ballot question election or the next candidate election to sort of get the word out through the press or something along those lines.
Yeah, I don't know how effective it would be, but maybe just a press release advising that if people are going to be, producing signs of this nature or whatever, mailers, that it could implicate, regulations, and that the commission is available to answer questions. That's all.
We'd be happy to do that.
Thank you, Commissioner Leclerc. Any other questions for yes, Commissioner Ahern?
Just building on Commissioner Leclerc's request, I was wondering as I read this, is there a way, because Mr. Ducharme is he chair of the Franklin County Republicans? Did I read that? Or am I making that up?
No,
He's confirming that, yeah.
So I would like to see if there's a way to use, pardon that word, use him as a spokesperson to help educate, Republican candidates in particular, since that's his lane, to say, I want to let you know that you got to really be careful and you got to contact the Ethics Commission because this is what happened to me. Now, I'm not clear about what kind of education that could be, but I say, it's particularly since he holds a place of leadership, it would be great if he could be involved in that education. And I don't know what he thinks about that, but Mr. Ducharme, I don't know if you have ideas about how you could help candidates make sure that they don't get in trouble.
Mr. Ducharme?
Being so new to this, and I took on the responsibility of volunteering for the chair, because they really didn't have anybody, but it is difficult for a regular person to just get online and find out the facts, to look through all the baloney and then find the facts and the laws and then find out what they mean, as far as that is concerned. And then once if I get information, I do put it out to the folks on my list, mailers, Facebook, things like that. I'm all about trying to get information out to folks.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we find that the Saviello signs violated the disclosure requirements and that we assess no penalty. It's time for a vote. Commissioner Hastings?
Yes.
Commissioner Marble?
Yes.
Commissioner Leclerc?
Sorry, yes.
Commissioner Ahern?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes as well. The second issue was the bunker signs, and I'll move that the bunker signs also violated the disclosure requirements of 21A MRS section 1014, paragraph 2A, and that we decide to assess no penalty.
Second.
Okay. Is there discussion? Okay. Yeah. Commissioner Hastings.
I just want to state that I agree with these primarily because the people that tend to come into us on these type of violations are not candidates, and they're just private citizens that happen to get excited about an issue and put up a few signs. Oftentimes it's just one or two signs, and the statute I don't think it's our goal to discourage people from being involved. And I appreciate that the statute has a provision that if the violation is corrected within 10 days, and as it was very promptly in this case, I think it recognizes that the type of people that can get ensnared in these types of violations are often people that are not actively involved in the campaigning political process, and they stick their toe in the water and they get caught. And the fact that they do correct their error very promptly, to me, is a great mitigating factor and would warrant waiving a penalty, certainly this time, but not next time. That's my comment.
I appreciate those comments from Commissioner Hastings, and I could not agree more. I think it's if Mr. Ducharme hadn't been so cooperative about going out and repairing the error, I would not be voting to have no penalty. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Okay, it's been moved and seconded that the bunker signs violated the disclosure requirements and that we are voting to assess no penalty. Commissioner Hastings,
Yes.
Commissioner Marble,
Yes.
Commissioner Leclerc,
Yes.
Commissioner Ahern,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes as well. Thank you, Mr. Ducharme.
Thank you, folks.
Now, we've had a request that we take item 9, the item on concerned citizens for York, yes on 12, that we take that out of order and next in the order. Is there any objection from commissioners to doing that? Okay, seeing none, I'll take this item out of order and we'll do it next. Jonathan is or Mr. Wayne is I'm assuming there are people there to speak on this.
Yes, the attorney who brought the complaint is here in person, and he has somebody online who would like to participate from his side. This is a complaint against a group of people going by the name of Yes on 12 in York, Maine. And the Yes on 12 people have several people that they asked to participate today, particularly because we've had some last minute submissions. So we're in the process of getting them joined to the Zoom meeting.
Okay, great.
I'm just waiting on Miss Ward's, oh, so she's joining me. I think everyone's there.
Do we have everybody on the Zoom?
Yes.
Okay, great. And the people who are there present, are they at the witness table?
Not yet. We're all set, Mr. Chair.
Okay, great. We should probably hear from well, actually, we should hear from Mr. Wayne first. The way we normally do this is Mr. Wayne briefs us on the structure of the facts, and then we'll hear from the participants. Mr. Wayne?
Sure. So for about a year now, if there are groups raising or spending more than $5,000 to influence a town referendum that's on the ballot in any town of any size here in Maine, if they go over that $5,000 threshold, they're required to register with the commission and file campaign finance reports. So this is a complaint about a group of local citizens who are supporting ballot question number 12 in York, Maine. And that's a proposed ordinance to establish some kind of a buffer zone between certain distillery operations and adjoining properties. And these are local residents who are concerned about health effects of distilleries and also their property values, I think, is also an issue. So they have engaged in a website and some local communications to people in York because they're supportive of the ballot question. But their view is they have stayed under the $5,000 threshold and they should not be required to register and file campaign finance reports. So the complaint is from the no side on the ordinance, who would like the commission to determine that they have exceeded the $5,000 threshold and they should register and file their financial activity with us. So if I could just mention some last minute submissions that we got. And I don't even know if Commissioner Marble or Mr. Hastings had a chance to look at this because they were in transit and I just sent them around by email. But the gist of the submissions we got earlier from Yes on 12 is that they provided us with an itemized account of all their expenditures and all the money that they received. And it comes to a total that's under $5,000. And they're saying to the commission, we've been transparent with you. We haven't hit that $5,000 threshold. We shouldn't have to register. We received a more focused letter last night from Mr. Auger, who is with the complainants. And his point is that the Yes on 12 individuals had received an expert report from a Canadian expert on fungus. And we received correspondence that indicates that was submitted to the town government. There have been some decisions before the town government in York relating to a particular distillery that's there right now and whether they can expand. So there have been town decisions, including by the planning board, relating to existing issues about expanding this distillery. And now those discussions have somehow led to this proposed ordinance that is now on the ballot. So if I can preview, I think what the commission is going to hear from the two sides, Mr. Auger is going to say that this report that the local advocates received from a Canadian expert, that's a contribution to their election campaign. And that lifts them over the $5,000 contribution threshold, such that these local advocates for this ordinance should have to register with the commission. I think what you'll hear from the Yes on 12 people is, we received this report for purposes of influencing a town decision on this particular distillery. This was not received by us for campaign purposes. That's not why we got this report. That's not why the report was given to us. And they're saying it's not a campaign contribution because that wasn't the purpose for which it was given to them. And their view is they're under the $5,000 threshold. So the staff has a sort of a point of view on this, but I think I've done a lot of talking, so I'll just pause right there and let you hear from the advocates on both sides.
Well, I'd like to hear the staff's point of view.
Well, I mean, I think Mr. Flaherty, who's on the Yes on 12 people, he's submitted documentation showing that he wanted this report shared with the planning board. Yes, I guess there was a reference to this fungus report that was later put on the website intended to influence the election. But I think it's a little unclear to me how they got this report. I think they are saying that they didn't pay for it, but somehow they got the report from the Canadian expert. And if the purpose at the time that they received it was that it was given to them to influence the town decision, I think if that seems right to you factually, I think they have the better argument that it's not a contribution, and that therefore they're under the 5,000 threshold. That's our point of view, but it sort of rests on factually whether you're persuaded that this was not something that anyone gave them for an election purpose.
Thank you, Mr. Wayne. Are there questions from commissioners for Mr. Wayne?
Not yet.
Okay, let's hear from the complainants.
Thank you, Commissioner Snyder. If I could just add a new logger with Pierce Atwood on behalf of the No on 12 campaign and my clients, Amanda and David Woods, who are the owners of a small local family-owned distillery, which is just on the east side of Route 1, a couple miles north of the Kittery border, are also joining. If I could just add a little bit to what Director Wayne said, I would perhaps talk a little bit about the nature of an in-kind contribution as I do that. But the report that the Dr. Saviello report was included on the Yes on 1 website. It was included as late as October 22nd of this year. And within the last 72 hours, the references to that report, the link to it, have been removed. And that to me is a very telling fact. How heavy you weight that is ultimately the commission's decision. But I think that has a lot to do with whether or not we're deciding whether this is an in-kind contribution. And if I could just elaborate further, whether or not this group received it for the purposes of a planning board meeting or not is frankly not the issue. It is whether they take it and use it to influence a campaign. And that is what they have done. And that is what they did. And more seriously, I think, and something to think about as the commission thinks about the purposes of these electioneering laws that we have. When I submitted this complaint, the purpose of it was, this is a small local business against this group of local abutters. It is people who may not be familiar with the election process, admittedly. The purpose of the complaint was simply to have this group notify the commission and register just as we are registering. They're putting out signs, they're putting out flyers, they're putting ads in the local paper. They're acting like a campaign in every other respect. They receive a report that is easily worth $2,500, if not more. And they link it to their website. And then within 72 hours after the complaint has been filed, the references to that report on the website have all been removed. Now, if I could, I'm trying to give a brief overview of kind of how we got here, because there are some representations in Mr. Flaherty's recent letter to you that I think strain a little bit of credulence. About 2 years ago, my clients applied for, and specifically the idea that Bedonia is not an issue, or whiskey fungus is somehow not an issue in this campaign, and that somehow explains away why this report is not an in-kind contribution. About 2 years ago, my clients applied for a permit before the York Planning Board for 2 storage buildings and a kitchen. The abutters to the project, who didn't like the ability that they couldn't see the project through the tree line, perhaps, I guess, but they advanced this notion that there was Bedonia, which is again the scientific term for whiskey fungus, that was being emitted by this distillery. The planning board actually denied the initial complaint. There was a UMO study that was done related to this that could not scientifically disprove that Bedonia existed. The planning board rejected the first application roughly in the fall of 2023. My clients then came back, and by the way, they were represented by Pierce Atwood on or about sometime after this time for their second application. I was not involved, there was no campaign. They filed a second application before the planning board. This is for one structure and a kitchen. The structure would be for pre and post material storage. The argument about Bedonia, and I think it's significant, I don't get too technical, is that there's ethanol within these whiskey barrels. Whiskey has to age for 6 or 7 years. The barrels, the whiskey sort of seeps into the staves, and then the vacuum sort of pulls it back out. It's a 6-year process. You build it and store it in a rick house. Bedonia does exist, but it almost exclusively exists in these gigantic industrial type whiskey productions like Buffalo Creek in Kentucky, right? And it doesn't exist within craft distilleries. And so because this issue had become such a discussion within the community, the abutters actually, I think, had started a website back a year ago, which is still linked to the current website they have, the Yes on 12 website. The Woods decided they wanted to get a mycologist to take a look at this. And as a side note, one of the reasons I love my job is I get to represent great clients, but also get to learn stuff that I never knew. Mycologist is someone who actually studies fungus. I did not know that a month ago. And her name is Dr. Sarita Fry. She's from UNH. She's one of the leading mycologists in the world. She came and did a DNA study. She was using data that was much more exact. and was able to scientifically prove that there was no Bedonia in the area around the distillery. And that study was necessary as part of the planning board submission, but it was also to try to dispel any further discussion that Bedonia was an issue. Dr. Fry's report was presented to the planning board sometime in August or September. That was after the Yes on 12 folks had submitted a petition to the town of York for inclusion on this referendum. And the petition essentially requires a certain number of setbacks. It's modeled on some Kentucky law that focuses on industrial type distilleries and would effectively shut them down or prevent them from doing any further improvements to their operation. Immediately after this document was made public, at somewhere about that time, the Yes on 12 supporters enlisted the support or received the support of Dr. Somerville. There's a reference to a Dr. Scott in a Facebook post from a Rhiannon Razzavoni, who's also, I think, a member of the Yes on 12 group, who references a Dr. Scott. But ultimately, the doctor, I think, who was engaged in this was a Dr. Somerville. And I submitted his report to you. It's a fairly detailed report where he tries to take issue with Dr. Fry's conclusions that no Bedonia existed in the area around the distillery. Interestingly, Dr. Fry found, I think, 1,100 other types of fungi in the area, as is probably expected in an area that's 50% woodlands. But and so anyway, the campaign, the petition was basically going on even as the planning board discussion was taking place. We filed as a BQC sometime in the middle of September when we realized we were getting close to the $5,000 threshold. And as part of our filing, we actually included Dr. Fry's report that was submitted to the planning board because we used it in all of our campaign literature to say to residents of York that Bedonia does not exist around the distillery, that it is not a concern, and that the ordinance that the Yes on 12 folks are advancing is not necessary. I guess I would just fall back to the very significant concern about the change to the website. And I hope perhaps you could ask Mr. Flaherty or someone on the Yes on 12 side as to why Dr. Somerville's report, which was on their website, perhaps he could confirm that, as late as October 22nd, has now since been removed. In the list of expenditures or in-kind contributions that the Yes on 12 folks included, we had originally listed that report at $2,500, and that puts them well over the $5,000 limit. I think they acknowledged that they've spent $4,889 thus far, and this report is certainly worth more than $112, and is clearly been used by this campaign to influence an election, irrespective of how they received it, irrespective of whether they've paid any money for it. It is an in-kind contribution. And if the commission were to change that definition, I think that would have a serious ramifications on prior commission rulings and interpretations of this law. So I guess, if their only mistake had been not to file, I guess I would sort of not wanted to make a federal case out of this, but the fact that this document was linked on their website. And now post Ms. Martha Courier's outreach to them, they have pulled that reference. I think that's something that deserves some very serious scrutiny by the commission in light of the purposes for which this commission exists and for which these laws exist. I'll leave it at that, but I'd like maybe turn over briefly to my clients who could introduce themselves and may want to add something if with Chair Schneider, with your permission, if that's possible.
Well, before you go, I want to have commissioners have an opportunity to ask you questions.
Oh, I'm not going anywhere.
So are there any questions from commissioners, questions or comments from commissioners from Mr. Auger?
I think I do, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please, Commissioner Hastings.
First, I don't think the purpose of this meeting is to litigate the right or wrong of the referendum. And I don't think we need to go quite so deep into it. Which side we should vote for on the referendum. That seems to be very much a big part of your argument. My big concern is, do we know who paid for this report?
I don't know, Commissioner Hastings, who did. I can't imagine that Sporemetrics would have just done it for free, but that's a question I think that's properly asked to Mr. Flaherty. Could I just give you, I apologize if I went on about the nature of the campaign. My reason for doing so was in light of Mr. Flaherty's recent representation in his letter that he just sent to you, that Bedonia was not an issue in this campaign. And I apologize if I went on forever, but my point in doing so was to point out that Bedonia is the central issue of this campaign. That's why the Yes on 12 folks have advanced this ordinance, because they believe that my client is causing Bedonia.
Could you very briefly describe the referendum and what it says? I'm trying to figure out what the issue is in the referendum. I know there's a yes and a no side. What am I voting on if I'm voting yes or no?
Could I have?
What did the referendum ask to be done?
Could I ask Amanda Woods to answer that question? I think she could do a much better job than I could.
Sure, that's fine. Ms. Woods? All right. Commissioner Hastings, yeah, go ahead.
Yes. Do you have a brief summary of the subject matter of the referendum?
I think she could do that much better than I could, if that's okay.
Well, Mr. Wayne, do you have a brief summary of the question that's at issue in the referendum?
I really only had limited time, but I think it has to do with some sort of buffer between certain whiskey operations or storage, if I could finish, and adjoining properties. And it's intended to, public health and other concerns, it's intended to address that, but that's as much as I know.
It sets minimum acreage requirements and minimum setbacks for any distillery in the town of York. I guess is that fair?
That's okay. That's okay. Generally what I was trying to get to.
Okay, I apologize.
Anything else, Commissioner Hastings?
Not right now. Thank you.
Anything else from other commissioners?
I'd like to wait until we hear from both sides, and then I'll have a couple of questions.
Okay, sure. Mr. Auger, did you want to introduce somebody else?
Yeah, Amanda Woods, who is one of the principal officers of our BQC, is joining us by Zoom from York.
Yes, Ms. Woods, would you like to address us?
Yes, hi, my name's Amanda Woods. This is my husband, David Woods. I just wanted to clarify and confirm that the issue that spurred this ordinance to be put into place was central to Bedonia. All through their campaign, it's talking about protecting health and property values, and that all stems from the Bedonia issues, along with other issues that they have said. And through the past few years, there was a website that was called fungusfreeyork.com, and that went that gave information from the Yes on 12 people about Bedonia specifically, how it harms homes and health. And if you go to yeson12.com and do /home, that website is still linked. And on that fungus-free york.com website, it also has Yes on 12 at the top menu bar. Just to show that there's the connection there, that Bedonia is in fact part of this issue. And then to give a little context, we did announce that we had received preliminary DNA results at the select board meeting that discussed the petition going on to the ballot. And that was the first time it was discussed. Furthermore, I would just like to address some claims that was said in Mr. Flaherty's email. Was that we have said that they are communists and suggest that they pack up and leave. In no way, shape, or form have we ever said that. It is unequivocally false. We live and raise our kids in this town as well. We wouldn't have gone to the extent of amending our application or even seeking a mycologist or DNA if we ever felt that. I just
want to stop you for a second. I don't want to show any disrespect or anything, but I'm going to force all of the speakers to stay on the topic that we're discussing today, and that's whether there was a violation of the campaign finance laws by the group Yes on 12 or Yes on 12.
Sure, no problem. So I guess I just wanted to make the comment that the Bedonia issue is central to this.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Mr. Auger, is there anyone else?
No, thank you, Chair Snyder. That's I just want to make sure before I conclude my initial remarks that the commission has exhibits 1 and 2 from the letter I sent last night. Those are screenshots of the Yes on 12 website as of October 17th and October 22nd that clearly show the reference to Dr. Somerville's report. Want to make sure everyone has that.
Yes, we have that. Mr. Wayne sent that out last night.
I have an exhibit A. Is that one of those? I don't know which exhibits we're talking. We all got this just hours ago. Some of this I'm only seeing for the first time right now.
I can appreciate that, and this is all. I mean, the complaint was really not a complaint. It was really just a request that the opponent's file as a BQC was made about a week ago.
I guess I'm not clear what your exhibit 1 and 2 are, because I don't have any exhibit.
Could I hand this to him, or do you have? You have it?
I'll share my copy.
Oh, they're in our package.
Well, they were, you have a lot of materials at your seats that you received only today. So just as a shortcut, Mr. Auger is referring to some pages from the Yes on 12 website, and they contain links to this study that he is urging the commission to say that's a contribution because it was on the campaign website.
Okay,
You got 2 more under there.
Oh, look
Yeah.
at
This one right here,
Okay,
and then
thank you.
the other supplement here.
Oh, okay.
So Commissioner Hastings, and I apologize, when I went into my diatribe about the different tests, the point of that discussion was to point out to you and your fellow commissioners that the final test that we've been talking about, just the Somerville test from the Canadian firm Spormetrics, shows up as a direct link on the Yes on 12 website. I'm holding here in my hand, this is a screenshot that was taken on October 17th. And you'll see halfway down, underlined, quickly called into, this is an underline, not by us, but by the Yes on 12 folks. This is an emphasis they have supplied, not us. Quickly called into serious question by mycologist, Dr. Richard Cyr. And that link would take you directly to the Spormetrics report that I included in my initial letter to you on the 24th. In my hand here This is a snapshot of the website as of October 22nd. And by the way, Ms. Woods can verify, she took both of these screenshots. Again, referencing the same reference, quickly called into serious question by my colleagues, Richard Somerville, with an underline supplied by the Yes on 12 folks with a direct link to the Somerville report. Both of these items are no longer on the Yes on 12 website. Within the time that the complaint was filed and Ms. Courier contacted the Yes on 12 folks, it has been taken down. And I think the explanation Mr. Flaherty gives, it strains, I think, some credulity, but even laying that aside, the in-kind contribution definition and all of the commission's prior holdings, at least that I'm familiar with, make it clear that this is an in-kind contribution to this campaign. And this campaign has used this contribution with a deliberate attempt to influence this election.
Mr. Auger, do you have any direct evidence of the value of the report?
When I submitted my letter to you, Chair Schneider, last week, I put it at $2,500, which is about half of the amount that we paid for ours. We paid Dr. Fry, I believe, $5,000, and we put that in our filing a couple of weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, as part of our filing commission.
But that's a guess, right?
That is a guess, yes. But I would stipulate that it is certainly more than the $112 that separate what this committee has acknowledged they have already paid and the $5,000 threshold. I can't believe it's anything less than $112
Okay, thank you.
in its value.
Amongst the respondents, is there a leader, Mr. Flaherty? Are you the spokesperson? You're muted right now.
Thank you. Sure, I'm happy to answer any questions. And I
Okay.
would also welcome any of my neighbors and fellow residents to jump in if there's anything that I miss or they feel they are more qualified to speak about.
Well, I'm not going to allow anybody to jump in, but do you want to make a presentation?
May I just read what the ordinance you were asking? This is the actual ballot. May I read the ordinance?
I'll address you after Mr. Flaherty has a chance to speak, ma'am. Mr.
Sure.
Flaherty.
So I included this in great detail in my letter to you that was pulled together at the very last minute last night in response to this 11th hour emergency accusation. But I will say that the Dr. Somerville report was a direct response to materials that the complainant shared with the planning board as part of a planning board application. I also included a letter from another legal representative at their law firm, which to the planning board, which requests that they include the Frey report in conjunction with the open planning board application. There has been no intention to use it to influence this ballot referendum whatsoever. Has it been referenced conversationally? Sure, maybe. But I think that the complainant and their attorney are taking it upon themselves to decide where the line is between where something is that exists is referenced and when it becomes influencing a campaign. I'm happy to answer any other questions about that.
Okay, Mr. Flaherty, do you know who paid for the Sporometrics report?
The Sporometrics report was not paid for.
It was not.
I will give you this
What-
context.
What does that, tell me what that means.
Sure. So when I reached out to Dr. Somerville to ask about this, and again, my intention was to take the Frey report and a previous report which had been done, which did show the presence of this fungus, and just say, hey, can you kind of help me reconcile these and understand why the results may be so different? He said, sure, I'm happy to take a look. And I asked what the rate would be to do that. And he let me know that Sporometrics consultation charges $300 an hour. And I said, well, can you give me an estimate of how long it might take for you to do this? And he said, I believe this would be 1 to 1.5 hours. That was the last we've talked about billing. This was over a month ago, I believe, and I haven't received any billing at all. So my assumption is that there probably will not be any billing associated with it.
Okay. Are there questions from other commissioners for Mr. Flaherty?
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Marble.
It's Mr. Flaherty, right?
Yes, sir.
And I'll confess to you that I'm old enough to be name challenged, and that's further added to the fact that there's a lot of names at play here. Can you speak to the apparent fact that a report was I won't say featured, was included on a website or in other public places up until a few days ago and then is not there? Because that's been brought up by the other side. Can you please speak to that?
Sure. Yeah. And I think it's important to note that the word featured is, we believe it was very different than that. So it has been suggested to us, by neighbors who are involved in this, that we reduce the amount of information on the website to more closely reflect the messaging in other ads and materials. And when this came up the other day, I thought, if there's any question about this at all, why not just remove it? It's an easy decision to do. But more importantly, if this were something that were actually central to the message, and I'm not saying that Bodwinia is not a big part of this campaign, but if this report were central to our messaging in trying to influence this campaign, it would not have been in a fact-checking section at the very bottom of our website. It would have been up at the top, and we would have been promoting it as the central messaging and talking about it all the time. And if we were going to do that, we certainly would have included it with our expenses, even just the in-kind value. The truth is, it has never once come up in conversation between all of the neighbors who are involved in this, because it is so not connected to the campaign, and it is so connected directly to this planning board application, which is now closed and approved in the complainant's favor.
Do you have further questions, Commissioner Marble?
No, not at this time. Commissioner Hastings.
I'm sorry.
I have a question.
Yes, Commissioner Hastings.
Thank you. So, Mr. Flaherty, I understand two things. You were told by Dr. Somerville, thank you. I struggle with names too. That the cost for this, when you asked, would be between 1 and 1.5 hours at $300 an hour. So the cost, at least at that point, you thought you were looking at between $300 and $450. Is that correct?
That was my assumption. And that's something that we were happy to do.
And you also did include this report on your campaign website, references to it. Whether or not it was the central argument, you did include it on your yes on whatever it was, the yes site on your website. You
Yes.
anticipated you were going to be charged for it at least $300, and you did include it on your campaign website, reference to it.
For a period of time, it was included in linked and referenced at the bottom of the website. That's right.
Can I say something?
No, not right now.
At some point?
Any other questions from commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Leclerc.
Again, we're trying to wrap our minds around this, in a brief period of time, this documentation. So my questions are going to be based, basically trying to frame the time frame here. So there was a planning board process that started when that involved the Summer Bell report, that the Summer Bell report was included in, is that correct? This is for Mr. Flaherty.
Yes, and so there, I'm trying to figure out how to best answer your question without going 2 years back to again do what Mr. Auger did and give you more context of the series of planning board meetings that have got us to where we are today.
Let me try to rephrase it then. When was the Summer Bell report received by you?
The Summer Bell report was received by me. I'll have to look in what I just sent to you, but I want to say it was around September 23rd, but I would need to look at that. It's documented in the letter that I shared.
Of 2024.
Correct.
Commissioner
And
LeClaire.
at that time, was there a process going on in York before the planning board?
Yes.
And is that ongoing?
No, that has since ended in favor of the complainant.
What date,
I'm sorry.
what date did that end?
Maybe they would be able to share that. I don't have that date at the ready. It was a couple of weeks ago.
Okay. And was the Summer Bell report submitted to the planning board during that process? And if so, when?
It was submitted to the planning board during that process. I included a letter in my previous package of materials from a couple of days ago with my letter to the planning board when I submitted it.
And again, we have a lot of documents in mine. My documents are on a mini iPad right now. So if you could just.
Yeah, if you can give me a moment, I'm happy to pull that up. Okay. All right, so you are looking for the date that I sent the Summer Bell report to the York Planning Board.
Yes.
It's in the packet.
That would have been September 25th, 2024.
And did the Summer Bell report appear online in association with the initiative before or after September 25th?
I don't know without going into the website and looking, because there have been things that have been added and removed periodically over the few weeks that the website has been active.
Okay. I mean, the point of my question is that September 25th, you submitted it to a government planning board, correct?
Correct.
And at that point, it will become a public document?
Correct.
Available to the public generally?
Yes.
Prior to that date, it wouldn't have been.
Let me clarify. I don't know if it immediately would have been available to the public when it was submitted to the planning board, because you need to submit materials to the planning board within a 17-day window prior to a meeting. And it was shared with them when it was received by me, which was not within that window. So the planning board did, prior to approving that application, vote and approve to accept materials that were submitted late, but I don't think that it would have been immediately available to the public.
Okay. So do you have before you information sufficient to answer my question? When did the Summer Bell report appear in association with the ballot initiative?
I don't have that information immediately available.
And my final question would be, you have indicated a belief that you're not going to be charged for this report.
Yes. But
but you're not disputing the fact that it has a value.
Sure, because I did inquire about consulting rates and was given, an estimate for that. And even if we were billed for that, I still firmly believe that this is connected with the planning board initiative. And I think that good.
Have you made any inquiry to Dr. Somerville or Sporometrics as to whether you're actually going to get a bill or not?
No.
Okay.
No.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners?
One other question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please, Commissioner Hastings.
Mr. Flaherty, when did the yes on no when did you start organizing the yes on no?
Yes, on 12.
Yes on 12. Yes on no.
No.
This would have been in, just going through my email to tell you an accurate date. This would have been in mid to late August when the leadership of the town of York suggested this option to us.
So the yes on 12 program was already up and running at the time you ordered the Somerville report, whatever his name is.
Somerville.
So we would have been probably still in the consultation process with the town, ensuring that everything is done properly to get it on the ballot. I can't tell you for certain if it was before or after the date that the select board approved for it to go on the ballot.
Well, some of the bills you submitted show that you were incurring charges back in September.
Sure.
And you indicated that you ordered the report from the doctor in October, around October 24th, I think, or something like that.
No, sorry, that was September. That was September, I think I said 16th or 17th that I reached out to him, which I included in my letter. But that was when the application with the planning board was open, and it was and their competing report was submitted to the planning board. I shouldn't say competing report, but the report that they submitted to the planning board was shared publicly. And so my response to that was to share that newly published report with this expert to get his opinion on why it would be different from results that we had previously. So these two things were happening in parallel.
Just because I thought in one of your letters, you indicated that you had this conversation to get the report from the doctor in October.
I don't believe so. And if I said that, that would have been, that would have not have been correct.
What I'm trying to get to is, was the report ordered before or after the yes on 12 was organized?
These things were happening in parallel. So the process of the citizens initiative required meeting with the town, collecting signatures, writing the ordinance, meeting with the town manager and town attorney. So this was over the course of a couple of weeks. Meanwhile, the planning board application was happening at the same time. And so trying to give you dates for when I shared the can you would you mind repeating the actual information that you're looking for, and I'll try to get that for you as quickly as possible.
All I'm trying to find out is, was the report ordered and was the yes on 12 referendum process up and going at the time you ordered the report from Dr. Somerville?
So I guess my question in response is, what do you mean by up and going?
Well,
Say something.
did you want any website stuff? Have you done anything? Have
The
you organized a
The
group?
website was also mid-September. I had reached out to Dr. Somerville to ask about this, to ask him to review this report on September 16th.
Okay, okay. Now I understand the dates. They were in September.
But I can't tell you for certain when the date when the select board voted to put this ballot to approve this ballot referendum.
Thank you.
Are there other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Hearn.
Yes, thank you. This is a question for Director Wayne. So, factually, we have the almost 5,000, but not quite. Suppose after the election, there's a bill for the $300 or $450. I'm wondering what the election date has to do with filing, because if the $5,000 threshold is met after the election, and the filing happened, is that copacetic? That I'm wondering if the election if there's a time restraint here. Because in my mind, the $5,000 threshold hasn't been met yet, but it could be. So I just would like some clarification there.
I think that there's information available now, based on everything Mr. Flaherty has said, for the commission to decide whether or not this is a contribution, or just to decide not to consider this any further. So I think the question really is now, even if there is no bill, whether there's a bill or not after the election, the question is really, was this a thing of value that Dr. Somervell gave to Mr. Flaherty for the purpose of influencing the campaign? And Mr. Flaherty, this is my own point of view, Mr. Flaherty has offered a cogent, plausible explanation that this was intended to influence a planning board. I haven't heard anything from Mr. Flaherty suggesting that the subject of a possible election even came up in his conversations with Mr. Somervell. And I see him shaking his head. So I think this should be based, to be fair to filers, should sort of be based on what is the objective evidence available to the commissioners. The objective evidence to me seems to be that there was at least a primary intent, or so possibly a sole intent, to influence a planning board decision. And could Mr. Flaherty have entertained ideas in the back of his mind that this could be used in an election? Yes. But we just don't, from my point of view, we just don't have enough evidence of an intent to influence an election to determine, this is my own point of view, you don't have to accept it, but it's just, there isn't that much evidence that there was a purpose by Mr. Somervell or by Mr. Flaherty to, obtain this report to influence the election. So I think we should decide whether to go any further this based on information now, not whether there's a billing after the election.
Thank you for that.
Commissioner Leclerc, did you have a question?
Based on what Mr. Wayne said, no, thank you.
Are there any other questions from, yes, Mr. Bolton?
I just wanted to add to what Mr. Wayne said. I think this, my view as well, is this does turn on what the purpose of the report was. I would say my interpretation is that when the billing occurs is less relevant than when the report was provided, because that is the thing of value, which may be the value of that may be undetermined at this point, but it clearly has some value, had some value at the time it was provided. So to me, that if it was a contribution, it did happen at the time the report was provided. But I think the question is it a contribution?
And I believe that's what Commissioner Hastings was getting at with his line of questioning. Are there other questions or comments from commissioners?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Leclerc.
This is for Mr. Bolton, and I'm just trying to get myself out of a mental corner, I guess. So my question is, if this was gotten for whatever purpose to give to the planning board, and at some point becomes a public document, is that relevant? And if it was used before it became a public document in association with Yes on 12, is that relevant?
Well, I think my perspective on that would be it could be relevant, but only to the extent it helps you to determine what the purpose of the asking for the report was. I don't think it has independent relevance beyond inferences you might be able to draw with regard to purpose, if that makes sense. So in other words, you know, if you have, let's take a hypothetical, sort of, you know, an example, you have a report that was prepared 10 years ago that somehow is relevant to this. There's no way that could be a contribution because we know there couldn't have been a purpose to seek that report in order to influence the election because nobody would have known there was going to be an election 10 years in the future. So, so it certainly could matter, but only with regard to the inference.
Commissioner Leclerc.
Just a brief follow-up. So is it relevant that it could have become a public document available for whatever purpose it was gotten? It became a public document within the context of the public proceeding of the planning board or select board or whatever municipal committee they were in front of, the report was presented to. Does at some point it's turning into a public document available to the public for use for whatever purpose? Does that have any bearing on this?
Well, I think if it was asked for, you know, in the hypothetical where the campaign asked for it because they want to put it on their website to get people to vote, you know, for the referendum, and then it later becomes a public document, I think that's still would potentially be a contribution because the purpose was to influence the election by asking for it. So I don't think that sort of there could be like that would retroactively change the status of whether it was a contribution or not because it later became public. I don't know if that answers your question.
Oh, that's not ours.
Are there other questions or comments from commissioners?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Marble.
what I'm struggling with, and I will again disclose to people in the room and the audience that I am not an attorney, but what I'm struggling with is separating the website from the quote campaign. If information available to the public now or later is placed on a website to influence a planning board, which is what I'm hearing, and that website is simultaneously in some form a part of a campaign on an issue, then I don't know how I get past that that's a campaign contribution, whether or not it was paid for.
Mr. Flaherty, would you like to address that?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that it was not posted on a website to influence the planning board. It was emailed directly to the planning board with the message that if they're going to entertain the Sarita Frey report, asking that they please also consider entertaining this response to it. It was not posted to the website for the purpose of the planning board seeing it or considering it.
So why was it posted on the website?
It was posted on the website in an area that was fact checking. And so if you were to look at the screenshots that the complainant provided, there's a number of themes and questions that kind of kept coming up on social media. And it was providing context to clarify those questions. Again, if it were something, I'm sorry. I was going to say, again, if it was something that was central to our campaign, we would have put it up at the top of our website and made it the headline of our initiative.
Thank you.
Is that it, Commissioner Marble?
That's it for me.
Okay. Are there any other questions from commissioners? Okay, Mr. Flaherty, is there anyone else who's on the Zoom from whom we should hear?
Beth
Me.
is raising her hand.
I'm hearing somebody, but I don't know who it is.
Beth Downs, you're hearing Beth Downs, I'm right here.
Okay, Ms. Downs.
Yes, I just want to say that the statute that was cited in the letter we got late last night, which even this whole proceeding has been 1 week that we've had to respond. This thing has been going on for 2 years. And I really don't think it's fair that we had to spend the weekend responding to this and these made up allegations. So what I want to say about the section that was given to us, which is section 3A of the law and how funds are spent. And it isn't just a one thing. Well, was it on the website, or was it for this, or was it for that? It was funds for the purposes of initiating or influencing a campaign. We did not get this report for that reason. Whether it was read that way, whether it was public because we had to give it to the planning board, that wasn't us who makes it public. That's the planning board. That cannot be assigned to us. So 3A says the first half, funds spent for the purposes of initiating or influencing a campaign. 1, we haven't spent any funds. 2, if you want to consider it in kind, we did not get this report for the purposes of Yes on 12. We got it for the purposes, as the email Adam sent to the commissioners shows, we sent it to the planning board in response to Wiggly Bridges study from Dr. Frey, who, by the way, is a soil expert. So we did not meet the first half of the definition of 3A. This report was gotten, for lack of a better word. We asked for it in response to their DNA analysis. At that time, that was before the planning board. There is no split anything here. It was for the purposes of the planning board, as Mr. Flaherty's email clearly shows, to Dylan Smith, to DeCarlo Brown, to all the members of the planning board staff and the planning board itself. How we've used it after, whatever, but the purposes of getting this report was not funds spent for the influencing or initiating of Yes on 12. I just want to say that you can't just look at half of the definition of 3A, which is what we were told to look at last night at 9 o'clock at night. So we're doing our best. We did keep it under, we called the commission before to say, what are the rules? You can ask your staff, I talked to them, and we kept within it. Now, that report was not gotten, it was not asked for as part of this Yes on 12. It was part of the planning board process because the complaining party continues to fight with us over whether they produce Bedonia. So this is why it's still going. This is why there are battling experts. That is not why we got it. And the very language of 3A disproves what they're trying to say.
Thank you, Ms. Downs.
Welcome.
Mr. Flaherty, is there anyone else we should hear from?
I would just ask if there are any other residents on who feel like they have anything additive to the conversation. And if so, please jump in now.
Ms. Zotos?
Thank you very much. I really appreciate everyone's participation. I think it's very important that we stay focused on the question. We have been on this call since before 9 o'clock, and it has felt that it's a courtroom rather than just focusing here on what question 12 is about. And I will read it aloud if I may.
Actually, we don't need that. The question here is whether the group Yes on 12 raised more than or expended more than $5,000 in the course of their campaign. And so
one of the commissioners did ask for the question earlier in the meeting, which
right,
is
and
why I went and got my absentee ballot to be able to read it to you all.
He got an adequate answer, I think. Commissioner Hastings, do you require any more information?
I've received all the answer I need on the
So he's all set with that. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Are there any other comments from commissioners? Questions from commissioners? Mr. Flaherty, is there anyone else we should hear from?
I don't see any other hands raised unless, oh, Jenna, go ahead, please.
My permission to speak?
Yes, is it CCOT?
It is, thank you. I just wanted to establish that, again, this whole thing started back in the fall of 2022. And we sort of have a timeline of competing testing that's been happening. You know, the town was actually the one who first asked for mold or fungus testing done on an adjacent property to see if one of the town codes had been violated at the time. And so they did the testing, chose the wrong type of testing. And so then, you know, we did some of our testing, and then they commissioned the Maine report. And so this was, you know, last year in 2023 by this time. And so then, you know, the complainant then asked for the Frey report. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that we, like you had discussed before, like, you know, things that had been gotten 10 years ago, could that be part of this campaign? Well, I would argue that that's kind of like this last Summerbell report is really just started all when we started the testing. And so essentially there's been 5 rounds of testing done. And, you know, he said in each of kind of a call and response type of thing. And so here we are. And I would just hate for it to be like, oh, this last thing that we asked as a response to a response to a response be considered as part of our campaign, when it does feel very central to what we were doing with the planning board and not at all central to the Yes on 12 campaign, which really is about just creating a boundary for a distillery. And yes, the fungus is one of our main arguments for the boundary, but it's not our only argument. So really it's about the planning board. And yes, we've included it in some of our, you know, information, but that's just, you know, information that we just felt like the public should know.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate it. Are there questions from commissioners? Okay. Mr. Flaherty, is that kind of wrap up your presentation?
I do have one note here, if you don't mind. I know we're not getting into the substance of the ballot referendum, but at the very beginning, when Mr. Auger was going through all of that context, I did want to clarify one thing that he said, is that this ballot initiative, he said, would quote effectively shut them down. That is not that's not accurate. That's not within the language here, and I just wanted to make that clear.
I appreciate it, but that's
Sure.
outside of what we're considering today. But thank you.
Understood.
Are there any more questions from commissioners for Mr. Flaherty? Okay, seeing none. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion if you'll accept one without citing legal chapter and verse to start this.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I would move that the placement of the link to the report on the website constitutes an in-kind contribution, and therefore triggers a finding that Yes on 12 is a ballot question committee, and they are therefore in violation.
Is there a second?
Yes, I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that that the use of the report was a in-kind contribution to the campaign, and that in effect places the group over the $5,000 limit, and they should have registered. Is there discussion? Commissioner Marble, do you want to kick it off?
There's a lot at play here, and the folks involved have a lot at stake on both sides, and I want to recognize that. 2 years is a long time, and there are many competing interests. Couple of the speakers have referenced getting this information, you know, at the last minute and last night and everything else, and I simply want to acknowledge that. We're focused on election campaign practices, not the content of the issue at hand that you're really working on. I think what I would accompany my motion with is a sense that any penalty we assess be minimal, in the range of $100. That's all I have.
Other comments from commissioners or discussion?
I just want to let you all know that I can't support that motion. My evaluation of this issue falls in line with the staff recommendation.
Thank you, Commissioner Hearn. Other comments or questions? Commissioner Leclerc.
I hate to keep putting the staff on the hot seat here, but I would wonder if Mr. Bolton or Mr. Wayne could respond to the argument put forth by Beth Downs regarding the statutory definition of in-kind contributions and their purposes.
Mr. Bolton?
Sure. I think the framework that she was laying out is correct. I think there's a factual question, right, about what was the purpose of asking for this report, which goes to the definition, the definition of a contribution as it's, anything of value made or received by a committee for the purpose of influencing a campaign. So the question is, what was the purpose of that report? That's what needs to be answered. But that is I think, in my opinion, that's the correct framework to look at this.
Anything else, Commissioner Leclerc?
Well, I still have some confusion about the dates when we don't know when it was put on the website. I'm not sure how relevant that is. But am I correct in that we don't know the time frame that this appeared on the website after receipt of the report, which I believe was on around September 23rd.
If that's directed to me, I don't think I heard that date from Mr. Flaherty, but it's possible I could have missed it. I don't think that we know the date.
The date of the report is September 23rd. So I think he said, Mr. Flaherty said that he received it a couple of days afterwards and it appeared on the website sometime after that.
And that's sometime after that is the source of my question is,
Yep.
Was it the day he got it? Was it 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later? That's the source of my question.
Well, I think we can ask it. Mr. Flaherty, can you answer that
Sure.
question?
Yeah, if you'd like me to respond, I don't have an answer for that. I could get, if you'd like for me to take the time to get into the website and try to go back through version history, I'm happy to do that. It may take a bit of time, but like I said earlier, there have been multiple edits to the website as we've collectively reviewed it and decided how to shape our messaging and what's relevant and what's not. So there's been multiple edits that I would need to go through to determine that for you. I can tell you, I don't recall it being immediately after we received it, but I would say likely in early October, but that I can't say that with full confidence.
Commissioner Leclerc, would you like him to pursue that?
It would be helpful information.
I don't know. I don't know that it would allow for a timely decision from us.
Well, I'm not going to demand it. I just put it into the mix here that there is no answer, so I'm not sure what we should assume or not.
Okay. My thought is, go ahead.
If I could follow through, does Mr. Auger know when it first appeared? Does he have any?
I don't, Commissioner Leclerc. I apologize. I don't. Maybe Amanda or David might know.
Commissioner Hastings, do you have a question?
I don't have a question, but my reason for supporting the motion is that it appears to me that both the referendum process and the planning board process were going on at the same time. And based on the bills that are attached to our information here, the initiative group was ordering websites and other things well back in September. So they were up and going at that point. The initiative process was underway in some shape or form, and they were incurring expenses. So to me, I think that the report, the Somerville report, essentially had a dual purpose, in my mind. And also, I find it hard to believe a PhD doctor wrote this 12-page report or whatever it is, densely. This is a very detailed report, and he only spent an hour and a half on it. I'm just amazed. I'm incredulous that this report, if it was billed out, would only be billed out at $300 or $400. It's a very well-written, long, detailed scientific report that spreads over 7 or 8 pages. So anyhow, I think that it was certainly simultaneously or almost simultaneously decided it would be used for both purposes. That would be given to the planning board, and that it would be posted on the website as in support of the referendum. So that's my feeling.
Thank you, Commissioner Hastings. My analysis of it is that I believe it was provided for the planning board meeting, and that at that time it became a public document. And I think a public document like that doesn't have any intrinsic value if it's used in any campaign for or against a ballot initiative. So I believe I'd be voting against the motion.
May I call the vote?
Yeah, sure. If nobody else, is there further discussion from commissioners? Commissioner Leclerc?
I just wanted to say that my thoughts are more towards what you just said. I feel it's unfortunate that we don't know the timeframes, so we could have that information available to us and to the public about when it appeared. So I'll probably not be supporting the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I will say it's a very close issue. I think it's one that, depending on how you assemble the facts, could be decided either way. So let's move to a vote. Commissioner Hastings?
Yes.
Commissioner Marble?
Yes.
Commissioner Leclerc?
No.
Commissioner Hearn?
No.
And I'll also vote no. So thank you very much to the parties. Thank you for bringing the complaint, Mr. Auger. It was an excellent chance to discuss the issue. Thank you, Mr. Flaherty, and your other folks for helping us make a decision. I think we ought to take I'll make a motion that we take no further action on this.
Second.
Commissioner Hastings?
Yes.
How do you vote on it's been moved and seconded that we take no further action on this. How do you vote?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Marble?
Yes.
Commissioner Leclerc?
Yes.
Commissioner Hearn?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes as well. So thank you, everybody, for coming to help us make this decision.
And I think it might be decent to take a 10-minute break. So we'll reassemble at 10:45.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Beth.
Your voice is holding up. That's good.
I got a chance to go get a cough drop, so
Oh, I'm so sorry.
hey, just one of those things. That's a tough question.
Interesting, but tough.
You convinced me. I said, whatever Dennis said.
Yeah, I'll get in trouble. Yeah, we're gonna do that for what?
I think I'm gonna get my last golf game of the year Friday.
Once I'm on fine.
Oh, you're gonna do it.
I have to go to work for a couple hours.
I think I can get away with this Friday too.
Played JW this morning last week.
Yeah.
I had to have that 20-some games. Like, that feels a little.
Not ideal.
I mean, so it's.
Okay, are we set to reconvene? Is Commissioner Leclerc with us?
I'm asking her to unmute right now.
Hello.
There she is. Okay, we can reconvene, and we've been requested to take question number 10 or item number 10 out of order because the respondent would not be able to be with us later in the day. So if there's no objection from anyone, we'll move to item number 10 on the agenda. And is there anybody here from the complainant side?
Yeah, Mr. Bradley is here, and shall I invite him up to sit at the witness table?
Yeah, is there anybody from?
I'm sorry, yeah, no, Mr. Dean, who brought the complaint, is not planning on participating.
Okay, so let's bring Mr. Bradley up and we'll hear from Mr. Wayne.
So this was a complaint brought by a concerned citizen of Freeport, Ralph Dean. There's a referendum on the ballot in Freeport that would authorize the town to buy a parcel of land on Main Street. And there are a group of citizens who have been promoting this referendum, and what Mr. Dean witnessed was that he had received a mailing in support of the referendum, and there had been some hand-painted signs also that he had seen. So he filed a complaint asking whether these folks have made all the disclosures that they needed to. And I want to thank Martha Courier, our assistant director, for administering this complaint just within a very short time period. What we obtained from the group of people who are promoting this, and we thank them for their cooperation, is that they have spent a total of $1,189 on these pro-referendum activities. That is not enough for them to have to register and file reports with us because they're under that $5,000 threshold that we just discussed. But they did send out a mailer that was included in the materials that says vote yes on question 1, 522 Main Street. I believe it did not say in that the name of and address of the people who spent the money for the mailing. So staff's recommendation is a determination that the mailing didn't comply with the disclosure requirements, and we're recommending a penalty of $50, which would be directed to the group as a whole. in recognition of the fact that this is a fairly new legal requirement and it's probably an unintentional violation. And Mr. Bradley is here to provide whatever information he would like. I haven't had a chance to talk to him directly about it myself.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wayne. Mr. Bradley, we'd like to hear from you.
Thank you very much. First, thank you for the courtesy of taking us out of order. We have a situation at home that we didn't anticipate, and it would be great for us to get back to take care of it. As Mr. Wayne suggested, this is prompted by a ballot question in Freeport about whether to buy a parcel of land. And we are part of an unorganized informal group of people called Yes on One, who have been meeting to promote and support the purchase of that land by the town of Freeport. I'd like, if I could, to introduce the other members of the committee who came here with me, because frankly, we all respect you and the law, and we wanted to come here to show that respect. And also because we don't really know what you might be interested in knowing about us or about what went on in Freeport. So each of us played a small role in bringing support together and thought any one of us might have the answer you need. So is that all right?
Of course.
Coming up with me in the order they are sitting is John Patterson from Freeport, Susan Nurse from Freeport, and Ford Reike from Freeport. I'm going to talk to you a little bit later about our experiences in life, because I think it reflects not on the issue of what we did or didn't do, but on our identity in the town of Freeport. We're all very well known. So you got a complaint that was, as I understand it, submitted roughly last Friday, maybe Thursday. We got a first notice of the complaint on Friday and midday. And because we aren't, staffed or have any communication set up among us, we scrambled all weekend to get the kind of information Martha Courier asked us to provide. We did our best, and I believe all we said is true. But in the short period of time, we might have missed $1 or two, but not much. First, Ms. Martha Curry asked us how much we had spent. And our letter in response, which I sent by email, indicates what we spent and how much. And my understanding is that was to determine whether we went over the $5,000 threshold or $500 threshold. $5,000 threshold, and we don't get anywhere near that. Our number that we came up with was about $1,100, and there might have been another $100 or so somewhere buried around in something somebody who is not here did, but I was unable to find that out. And to the best of my belief, the number I gave you in my letter is correct. The second part of the complaint is that we sent out and I think the only remaining part of the complaint that you're considering is whether we sent out a mailing which failed to identify ourselves. So our identity in the mailing is the basic issue, as I understand what your concern is about what we did. I was the person who was from this group that went out and organized the development of the mailer and paid for the delivery of the mailing to the post office with the expectation that I'd be reimbursed. So it was a committee action. We did it. There's no question we did it. And you have in your materials what we sent. And it identifies a big sign that we have placed in the middle of Freeport on the property with the permission of the owner about our position. And it shows on the back the short message we sent, which is with the reasons we thought people in town should support the ballot issue. As of this, and I know I'm learning a lot about what you do based on what I've heard already sitting here, and not from any other source. But we participated individually and as a group in the development development of this ballot issue from day one, with the town clerk, with the town manager, with the council. We were involved in this group in the development of the ballot question itself. And then when the town council put it out to public vote, we began to support it. I tell you that not because I think that's relevant to the issue of identity, our identity, but to show you that we were not hiding, that our identity was well known to everyone involved in this issue. We have been at it for over a year, and we have been promoting this in public and at public meetings and public hearings, and it's been reported in the newspaper about who we are and what we think. So if we didn't specifically say we publish this and we pay for it, but it was totally unintentional. We just simply didn't know there was a requirement in state statute to do this. I'm understanding it's relatively recent, but we just didn't know. So to the extent we did this, and I guess we did, and I'll say one more thing about that in a second, but it was an honest mistake, and we're here out of respect for what you do and know that election laws are important. In our lives before now and probably after this, we've always respected those and been involved in them as much as you are here. The only reason I say I have one more thing to say is that in a way, we identified ourselves on the sign. We are yes on one. The sign says that we're being complained about for not having identified it. It says we are yes on one. We support this. But again, I say it not to the statutory requirement, but just to say that we aren't hiding anything and we made a dishonest mistake. I have read the staff report and heard it, and I don't have and don't want to make a federal case out of this. I don't want to make an elaborate defense of what we did for any reason. I just want to simply say we're sorry if we put you through this, and we're sorry we're going through it ourselves. We certainly never intended it, and we had any idea ever that we should have put information on the mailing. We would have done so. I would have done so. So assuming that this is not an ethics complaint, but a reporting concern, assuming that we're talking about a $50 fine, which is not unreasonable in our regard if we made the mistake. And assuming this applies to our committee and not to us individually, we rely on our letter, and thank you for taking this under consideration out of order so that we could go home.
Thank you, Mr. Bradley. I really appreciate it. And for my part, I don't believe there was any intent to deceive or anything like this. It's a fairly new requirement, and the commission over the last several months has been engaged in kind of an education process. So unfortunately you fall into this education process that we're working on, but thank you very much for your presentation. I appreciate it. Are there questions from other commissioners, questions or comments? Okay. I'm sorry.
Commissioner Hastings, I'm not showing up on the screen, so I've been
Okay.
blackballed. There you go. I just wanted to say, Bradley, I totally respect your honesty and integrity. Yeah. And but unfortunately, in your honesty and integrity, you have in writing admitted to a violation when it comes to the mailer that you sent out, of which you spent $781, as you said. And unfortunately, intent is not one of the requirements, I think, for these violations. The statute doesn't require that. Your conduct was totally understandable, but in violation of the law, yes. And I want to be clear that I don't think there was ever any intent to mislead anybody by you or your group. Thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you, Commissioner Hastings, and I agree wholeheartedly. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Okay, seeing none, I will move that we find that the mailer violated the statute by through its lack of a disclaimer, and I will recommend a $50 penalty. Is there a second? Second from Commissioner Leclerc.
Yes.
Is there discussion?
I believe one or two of the people might like to say one more thing here. I saw a hand up that maybe you can't see.
I
I
cannot.
would personally ask them to keep it brief because of procedure.
Thank you. I'm Ford Reiki. I'm also from Freeport, involved in this. I just want to point out, this was Mr. Bradley's postcard, but we did do it as a group. But I want to note that your agenda item number 1 is factually the same as this. It was an innocent violation on disclosure. And you had no penalty on that matter. I'd like you really to consider no penalty on this matter. Mr. Bradley, I don't think has a history of violations and fines in his past. He's a citizen of the year in Freeport, and a town councilor, and a respected citizen. And it's only $50, but it's a big deal on your personal pride. Thank you very much for considering this.
Thank you, sir. And just for my part, I'll state that the difference between this and the first item on the agenda was that the lack of disclaimer was promptly remedied by the person in the first thing we considered. And since this was a mailer, there was really not a way to do that. So it's been moved and seconded that we find that the mailer violated the disclosure requirements and that we impose a $50 fine. Is there further discussion amongst commissioners? We'll move on to a vote. Commissioner Hastings?
Yes.
Commissioner Marvel?
A reluctant yes.
Commissioner Leclerc?
Yes.
Commissioner Ahern?
These are all my friends, but I agree, yes.
And I'll vote yes as well. So thank you very much, Mr. Bradley, and your folks for coming to help us make the decision, and we appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for how you conduct yourselves.
Okay, let's move on to agenda item 3. This is a request for a penalty waiver from candidate Richard Cyr. Mr. Wayne, is there anyone here present to address this?
Mr. Cyr is here and he just moved on up to the witness table.
I'm here chomping at the bit, sir.
Outstanding. We'll ask Mr. Wayne to give us a brief factual synopsis, and then we'll speak with you.
Mr. Cyr is a first-time candidate running for state senate, and he was required to file a report 42 days before the election on September 24th. The report was filed 1 day late, and the way our penalty process works here for candidates and also for the political committees is that anytime someone files a report late, we send them a late notice with a preliminary penalty amount that is determined, and the amount is determined by a formula and statute. And then the person who receives the preliminary penalty notice can ask for a waiver, and Mr. Cyr is here to ask for the waiver. And the amount of the preliminary penalty based on the amount of activity in the report is $498.50. So he's asking for a full or a partial waiver of that amount. Just as background, candidates often come before the commission and are late filing a report for a variety of good faith routine reasons. Maybe there was a miscommunication, maybe there was a reliance on somebody who couldn't come through, or there was a lack of understanding of the report. And so there's all sorts of unintentional reasons that a report is filed late. The commission has had a history, even when the intentions are very good, of assessing some positive penalty in order to reinforce that candidates and their treasurers need to follow it through and make sure the report is filed on time. Since 2018, well, there was a referendum in 2015 that increased the penalties for late filings, and our commissioners in 2018 decided they needed to, across the board, sort of increase the late filing penalties to kind of comply with the ethic of that citizen initiative that passed. So beginning in 2018, there was a track record that preliminary penalties would reduce for candidates who had these good faith errors somewhere in the range of $300 or $350, but with an understanding that if a candidate comes forward with good cause, they could assess no penalty. The commissioners could assess a penalty of less than $300. So Mr. Cyr's explanation is that he has been entering his expenditures into the campaign finance e-filing system that we use himself, and then relying on his treasurer, Mr. Capisi, to file the reports. And Mr. Cyr entered all his transactions 3 days before the deadline, and he was relying on Mr. Capisi to file the report, and he told his treasurer that it was all ready to go, but that didn't happen. Mr. Capisi indicated he had not checked to make sure it went through, and there might have been a Wi-Fi failure. One relevant point of fact from our point of view is that we don't see any record that Mr. Capisi even logged in around that deadline to file the report. I'm not trying to contradict or accuse anybody of anything. We just don't have a record that there was even a login to complete the process of filing the report by Mr. Capisi. So the staff is recommending a reduction to 300 just to stay within that range, but it's really up to you. Whatever you determine is fair. It's appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wayne. Are there questions from commissioners for Mr. Wayne?
No.
Okay, Mr. Cyr, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, sir. This is my first time, as was stated, and it's my fault that I did not follow up more than I did with Mr. PC. I told him that the report was ready to go, and he said he would do it later because he was at the gym. And he sent me a text saying, no, he called me and told me that he had sent the report in. I let it go. And I now know, and you've got my attention, that I have to get that little report on the email that says your file has been accepted. And I have been judiciously after Mr. Peachy every time. All my reports have been filed in a timely manner since then. And I filed my last report and I got confirmation I don't have to make any more reports until December. I've only got $16.02 left in the account, and I don't think I could get very many cups of coffee with that. I am still asking for a complete waiver, but I will accept whatever the commission gives me.
Thank you, Mr. Cyr. I appreciate that presentation. Are there questions from commissioners for Mr. Cyr?
Just a curiosity, was Mr. Is it Capici? Is that how he pronounces his name? Capisi. Was he acting as the treasurer or any other candidate to your knowledge?
He's done it before.
Okay, but was he acting for other candidates?
I do not know, sir.
Okay, but you know he was experienced.
Yes.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from commissioners for Mr. Cyr? Okay, I will move that we find that the report was filed late and that we reduce the penalty to $300. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we find that the report was filed late and we reduce the fine to $300. Is there discussion amongst commissioners? Okay, hearing none, we'll move to a vote. Sounds like my dog is voting. Commissioner Hastings.
Yes.
Commissioner Marble.
Yes.
Commissioner Ahern.
Yes.
Commissioner Leclerc.
Yes.
And I'll also vote yes. And thank you, Mr. Cyr, for appearing. We really appreciate it and for your honesty and straightforwardness.
And I just hope that your treasurer helps you to pay for that, because I surely believe it was his fault, not yours. So.
Well, I'm not gonna do that to him, but I appreciate it that at least It's down to 300 instead of 500, or almost 500. And you folks have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you, you too. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 4, a request for a penalty waiver from candidate Flavia DeBrito.
This was a written request by Flavia DeBrito for a waiver of her penalty. We tried to confirm whether she would be participating in the meeting, and we. Are you here? Oh,
There's a woman that's been coming in and out, I don't know.
oh, there is a person who hasn't identified herself. It's possible she could be connected to this matter, but she stepped away. We could wait on this till later in the meeting, Mr. Chair, or however you want to handle this, fine. We just don't know.
There's somebody here who could enlighten us.
She's here.
Okay, let's postpone it until later in the meeting then.
Okay. Thanks.
Here she is.
Oh,
Is she there?
I'm here, I'm sorry, he's in the bathroom.
No problem. Who are you, ma'am?
I'm Whitney Parrish Perry.
Oh,
Am I the
sorry,
wrong?
different matter.
Perfect. I'll be back here. Thank you.
Thanks. And Kevin.
I think we've concluded that, because that Ms. DeBrito is not going to be participating in the meeting because we just haven't heard from her and there's no one else present, so.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll proceed.
Okay, Ms. DeBrito was also a first-time candidate. She was running for the Maine House of Representatives. She was required to file that same report on September 24th, but her report was filed one day late. Based on the activity in the report and the number of days late, the preliminary penalty is $64.90. She, in her letter asking for a waiver, she explains that her treasurer fell ill and there was a substantial number of contributions that she had to report. Because the preliminary penalty is $64.90, and as I explained in the last matter, oftentimes these routine penalties result in a penalty in the range of $300 or $350. And because $64.09 is less than that usual range, the staff is recommending no waiver of the penalty.
Next. Thank you, Mr. Wayne. Are there questions from commissioners?
No.
Okay, I'll move that we find that the report was filed late and that we assess a penalty of $64.90.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Okay, we'll move to a vote. Commissioner Hastings?
Yes.
Commissioner Marble?
Yes.
Commissioner Leclerc?
Yes.
Commissioner Ahern?
Yes.
And I'll also vote yes. Thank you very much. Moving to agenda item 5, a request for a penalty waiver from the Democrats of Kennebunkport, and Arundel. Is there anybody there to address this, Mr. Wayne?
No, there's not. We received an email from the treasurer that she's not going to participate and she'll rely on your decision and pay whatever penalty you decide on.
Okay, terrific.
Party committees are organized in some parts of the state at the county level or the town level. And if a local party committee raises or spends more than $1,500 in a calendar year, they're required to file up to 3 reports during the year. One of the reporting deadlines this year for the local party committees was July 15th, 2024. And that covered a time period of the first 6 months of this year. So the Democrats of Kennebunkport and Arundel is one of those committees. And they were required to file a report on July 15th, and it was filed late in September, 72 days late. And we don't have a full explanation for why it was filed late, other than the email from Ms. Goodman, who wrote, "I recently asked for my credentials for the committee report page. I was flabbergasted to discover that the January to June report had not been filed." And she asked for an opportunity to file these reports. And initially we thought she owed 2 reports. It's kind of a long story, but our determination was that there was only 1 report that was filed late. And the preliminary penalty for the late filing is capped at $500. And so that's the preliminary penalty amount. The commission has a history of generously reducing penalties against these local party committees, as current experienced commissioners know. There are a lot of times people get engaged to file these reports as volunteers. There's a lot of lack of knowledge about what the deadlines are. A lot of people don't know about the $1,500 threshold to file reports. So the commission just has a history of reducing these penalties from the $500 maximum. And as we included in the materials, since 2018, there have been 5 or 6 cases where the $500 penalty has been reduced to $100. So the staff is recommending a reduction to $100 because just to be consistent with those prior decisions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wayne. Are there questions from commissioners for Mr. Wayne?
No.
Okay. I'll move that we find that the report was filed late, and I'll recommend that we reduce the penalty to $100. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there further discussion? We'll move to a vote. Commissioner Ahern,
Yes.
Commissioner Leclerc,
Yes.
Commissioner Hastings,
Yes.
Commissioner Marble,
Yes.
and I'll also vote yes. So thank you very much, Mr. Wayne.
Thank you.
Agenda item 6 is our proposed changes to the campaign finance law. Mr. Wayne, is there anybody in the room who is wishing to speak about this?
I don't believe anyone's here to speak about the statute changes. We have 2 people in the room who are here on the next agenda item, which is number 7.
Okay, I think it makes sense then to postpone agenda item 6 until the end of the meeting, and we can kind of hear from the other people who are actually there, and get them done and moved on. So agenda item 7, and that's without, I'm assuming nobody will object to that. Okay, moving on to agenda item 7, that's a Maine Senate Republican PAC mailing. Is there someone to address that?
Yes, the person who filed the complaint, Whitney Parrish Perry, is here today. I don't know if she intended to make remarks but she's walking up to the table, so I guess the answer is yes.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
And what we usually do is I'll have Mr. Wayne address us on the basic factual outline, and then we'll turn to you for comments.
Thank you.
Mr. Wayne?
This relates to a mailing that was sent out by the Maine Senate Republican PAC in support of the state Senate nominee here in the Augusta area for District 15. And that nominee is Representative Richard Bradstreet. Representative Bradstreet has had 4 terms in the House, and he's running for state Senate. And the complaint notes that this mailing includes a dear friend's message from the outgoing state senator, Matt Pouliot, who wants to, conveys a thank you to the constituents in the district, and then also urges a vote for Dick Bradstreet. So the way our campaign finance laws work in Maine, PACs and parties can spend as much money as they want on communications directly to voters, provided that they are acting independently of the candidate and the agents of the candidate and the candidate's political committee. But in this case, the mailing includes a message from Matt Pouliot, who happens to be the treasurer for Richard Bradstreet. So what the complainant is bringing forward is, isn't this a contribution to Senator Bradstreet because his very own treasurer had some sort of involvement in this mailing, at the very least, approved the message for the mailing and that sort of thing. So is this an expenditure by the PAC we're being asked to consider that was done in cooperation with the campaign treasurer, and so isn't that a contribution to Mr. Bradstreet? And we received some responsive information from the PAC, and I guess I'll stop right there.
Terrific. Thank you, Mr. Wayne. Are there questions from commissioners for Mr. Wayne?
Mr. Chair,
Yes. Commissioner Hastings.
thank you. Mr. Wayne, just assuming that we found this was a contribution, who's made the who are we talking about as being the person or the entity that has violated the statute? Is it the candidate or is it the PAC or both? I'm a little confused myself.
Well, let me just emphasize.
If we find them $100,000, who has to pay it?
I think potentially there could be two violations, and this is all on the assumption that the commission views this as a
And
contribution.
by the way, I throw that number out in jest. I'm not suggesting that we're gonna be talking about.
So as Mr. Bradstreet, Representative Bradstreet is participating in the Maine Clean Election Act program, he is not allowed to accept any cash or in-kind contributions as a term of participating in that program. So if the commission were to determine that this was a contribution to him, he would be in violation of one of the provisions of the Maine Clean Election Act. But I hasten to note that in the response from Josh Tardy, who's the attorney for the PAC, he's stating that Richard Bradstreet had no knowledge of this mailing whatsoever. So if it were a contribution, you would have to, and you were to accept that as a factual proposition, you'd have to wrestle with what's fair if Representative Bradstreet actually didn't even know about the mailing. I think it also could be a violation by the PAC. I mean, this is all hypothetical in that if it were a contribution, because there are prohibitions on making contributions over certain amounts to candidates, and this could have exceeded those amounts. And also there's a question of, were the independent expenditure reports filed? If there was an independent expenditure report filed by the PAC in connection with this, in which they stated it was really independent of the candidates committee, I think some review of whether that report was accurate would be in order, and that could be a possible compliance issue, but I don't know yet. That's kind of premature.
And there's kind of echoes of agency in this case as well, because the person who ostensibly made the statement on the mailing was is the treasurer for the candidate. Is that correct, Mr. Wayne?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's correct. Although I'm not aware of that Senator Pouliot, even if there's some degree of fault on his part, I'm not aware that he violated any law, which is, yeah.
Thank you. Other questions from commissioners for Mr. Wayne?
Not at the moment.
So we just don't know.
Right. I think that's kind of where I am. Ma'am, are you Ms. Perry?
I am.
Terrific.
Correct.
Would you like to speak to us?
Sure. Thank you. I appreciate you all taking this up, as I said in my letter, which conveyed my concerns pretty thoroughly. I'm a resident of Augusta, a voter of Augusta, and I received this mailer on or about October 18th. My middle worker husband left it in the car, and so I didn't see it until the weekend. It was not addressed to him, which is surprising to me. It was addressed to me, and so that's why I wrote the letter to the commission. I have the same questions. You know, it was strange to receive a mailer with the treasurer's name on it. Obviously, I know Senator Pouliot, who's been our elected official for a bit, and as he notes, he's sort of, I think, quoted in the email saying his involvement is ceremonial for name recognition, which is not my understanding of the role of a treasurer on a campaign. But I had a couple questions based on what I got in email. And again, I have the same questions on sort of who's at fault here necessarily. But it raises concerns about the lines and boundaries that exist with Maine clean elections and just the integrity of this process. So, you know, was the endorsement approved prior to him being the treasurer? And when was he expected to have the mailing go out? The email states that he approved the language, so that's odd to me. And is there a difference between him writing the mailer and signing off on the language? And if Representative Bradstreet fills out his own reports and indicates they're complete for filing, how do we know there's no coordination? How does the senator know there's no coordination if he's not sort of reviewing those? So that's all to say, they both elected officials have been doing this for a very long time. They've been elected officials for many years, and obviously the PAC has been doing its work for a very long time as well. And this just feels like some kind of, I don't know, it would be a very, very significant oversight, not to indicate that Senator Pouliot is the treasurer. So that's why I wrote the letter requesting that this be looked at. And I mentioned that I received the mailer, what is it, last weekend? Because there hasn't been a lot of time. Mailers are intentionally mailed at certain times right before the election. And so I understand that there hasn't been a lot of time for response, but I still think it warrants being looked at. So I appreciate your time and attention to it.
Thank you, ma'am. We appreciate you bringing the complaint and raising some legitimate questions. Are there questions from commissioners for Ms. Perry?
No.
Okay. Seeing none, in my opinion, I think we don't have this fully fleshed out yet. I think we probably need to have some fact finding done and some investigation. So I would propose that we commit this to the staff for further
Mr.
investigation.
Chair?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, you don't have it on your screen, but Mr. Tardy, I think, is here.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that. I would never overlook Mr. Tardy.
Good morning. Good morning, Commissioners. Josh Tardy, and I am here on behalf of the PAC. And on behalf of the PAC, I want to say, first of all, we don't begrudge the intent behind the complaint. There's many times these are opportunistic and late in stage, and I have come in and argued that it was just politics as usual. I think it's always a fair question to question an expenditure that's purports to be independent and with this particular fact pattern. And I can assure you that I believe in consistency of process. And I do think this warrants an investigation to which the PAC will fully cooperate. But my statements I made in my very brief response do speak for themselves. This is not something that Representative Bradstreet had any knowledge of. The first he'd seen this postcard, if I might have the liberty to express what he stated to me, was when I sent to him the ethics complaint. I've been in front of this commission for about 14 years as an attorney. I have never been sort of an advocate on behalf of a prosecution of complaint. I've been defense in most modes. But I do have some personal experiences with how this commission has dealt with these types of allegations in the past. In particular, myself or my firm has dealt with on at least 3 occasions. The very first one was when I was out of the legislature and back in lawyer mode. It was in 2012. My firm represented a very closely named PAC. I think it was the Senate Republican majority PAC. they've changed names. And that involved, the Farnham-Gratwick race. And in that particular case, the Senator Farnham was on the PAC as a principal officer, but she didn't necessarily, she had consented to it, but hadn't recognized that, had no part in the PAC decisions. And there was a PAC expenditure and money spent on that Senate race in Bangor. And that was a big headline moment at the time. And there were sort of presumptions of coordination based on somebody's registration on the PAC as a principal officer. But then under then Chair McKee, at the right time and through hearing, I believe the commission didn't go to investigate further as it related to Senator Farnham, was satisfied that although she was on the PAC, that she was not the coordinator and not the facilitator of the expenditures that were made purportedly as independent expenditures. In 2020, there was an allegation of coordination against another Senate Republican friendly PAC, and that dealt with the Senator Dow race. And the complainant then was former Senator Johnson. And there was a process that was honored then. And then, although it was a little bit different, I believe it was a special election in 2021, and it had to do with whether a clean election candidate had received an improper contribution. It had to do with a road sign, electric. I don't know if you can recall that, but it was the electric transportation sign and what value could be ascribed to that. And I think that was a Garrett, maybe Hickman race. And but look, as somebody who comes in front of the commission and somebody who's very interested in transparency in elections, I just think it's important that the commission's staff, and I have great confidence in the staff, takes a consistent approach in its investigation analysis, and then the commission as a whole has a consistent approach in the resolution of these type of complaints. But I can assure this commission that Representative Bradstreet is an unwilling participant in this process. But to that, Representative Bradstreet and his campaign could be part of the solution. I'd note in the staff recommendation that Director Wayne made in the October 2020 meeting, he talked about the investigation gives time for the staff to investigate and also to, quote, find an alternative approach that has been used by the commission staff to reconcile the term, his term, accidental acceptance of a contribution. It comes down to, if I don't know how you unring the bell on a contribution. If this PAC that I represent had decided to rent a Goodyear blimp with a Matt Pouliot loves Dick Bradstreet slogan and run it over the Coney Rams homecoming, you can't unblimp the blimp. But there are ways that you can reconcile campaign finance reports that still create transparency, accountability, and public trust.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tardy. It's always a pleasure. Are there questions from members of the commission for Mr. Tardy? Seeing none, I'll say thank you once again, and we'll move on to, I made the motion that we direct the staff to further investigate this issue. I don't think we have enough facts in front of us to really consider it. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we initiate an investigation. Is there discussion from commissioners?
Just a question from Mr. Wayne, if he's feels clear enough on what we're asking him to do.
Yeah, I do have one question. I mean, I think what an investigation would look like to me is for me and a colleague to get in touch with the PAC, speak to the people involved in the PAC who are involved in the mailing. Also with Mr. Pouliot, Senator Pouliot, possibly a request for email, like a very narrow set of email communications we might request just to verify that the representation that the candidate didn't know about this. We could keep those confidential. We probably also want to talk to the candidate, even if he's didn't know about it and is not loving participating in this. I think it would be absolutely appropriate to talk to the candidate. So that's what I would envision an investigation looking like, just preliminarily.
That was my vision as well.
Okay. The one thing I wanted to ask about is, since Josh Tardy brought up the issue of, is there a possible remedy that would eliminate any violation? I'm not sure if there is a potential for that or not, but sometimes in other contexts where a candidate has sort of unintentionally received some kind of benefit, some service that has been given to the candidate, we have advised that the candidate simply pay for the service with their campaign funds, and that eliminates the receipt of a contribution. And I don't know if that's something that Representative Bradstreet would entertain here. I don't know, whether he wants to go down that road or not. I have no idea. Particularly if
Well, honestly, I don't know. I don't know that we're to that stage yet. I don't know that we could make that kind of a recommendation or even lay out that possibility. I'm not convinced there's a violation or that there's not.
Okay, so shall I not pursue that for the time being and just get the facts first? Right. Is that how you feel?
Well, I think
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
yeah, I think you're free to look at that, but I think it's preliminary to be really offering it out there.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Hastings.
Just wait, I'm still interested in knowing who the violation, if in fact this was a coordinated expenditure. Who was committed a violation and what section deals with the penalties? That's just a question. You don't need to answer right now, but it's unclear to me.
Well, I'm happy to answer the question directly.
If you know the answer right now.
About what statutes could apply, but I just want to reiterate, what the chair just said, which is we don't even know if this should be viewed as a contribution to the candidate. But in the hypothetical of if you were to make that determination, there's a potential Maine Election Act violation. I stress potential. I don't want to. We're in an election season. I don't want to, presume that there was a violation here, but it's potentially there could be an issue with compliance with the Maine Election Act requirements. Also, there's a section 1004 or 1004A, which says a donor that gives an over the limit contribution can be assessed a monetary penalty. That could come into play as well. So, but again, we're a lot of steps before that.
Okay.
At this point, yeah.
Are there other questions or comments from commissioners?
No.
Okay, so I've moved that we ask the staff to conduct an investigation of this question, and it's been seconded. So we'll move to a vote. Commissioner Leclerc?
Yes.
Commissioner Ahern?
Yes.
Commissioner Hastings?
Yes.
Commissioner Marble?
Yes.
And I'll also vote yes. So thank you very much to Ms. Perry and Mr. Tardy for coming in to help us with this.
Thank you.
And we'll move on to agenda item 8, which is a complaint about Cape Elizabeth referendum advertising. Mr. Wayne, is there anybody present to discuss this?
No one from the complainant side is participating in the meeting, but we did invite one of the respondents, and he is online, so we can get him hooked into this.
Okay, Mr. Krauser, I assume you're that person.
I am that person.
Terrific.
Hi, everyone. My name's Rob Krauser. I live here in Cape Elizabeth. I hope
Thank
you don't
you.
find me $100,000.
We'll try not to.
Okay, thank you.
What I usually do is have Mr. Wayne give us a factual background, and then we'll turn to you for some elucidation.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wayne.
So on November 5th, the town of Cape Elizabeth is holding a referendum on the issue of whether the town may borrow money for school construction. And one of the opponents of the referendum, Mary Ann Lynch, filed a complaint with our office about two different ads in the local newspaper, the Cape Courier, which are in support of the referendum. So there's two different ads at issue, and they're organized by two different groups of people. I'll go in order in which they're discussed in the memo. Mr. Krauser is on the second ad, so the one I'm about to get into right now does not relate to Mr. Krauser. One of the ads is a full-page ad in the Courier newspaper. It's entitled "Neighbors Say Yes to Critical School Investment," and then they talk about how it's time to invest in the schools, and so they urge a yes on the referendum, and they urge a yes on 3 candidates who are running for local office. And at the bottom of the ad are 7 couples are listed, and they are the sort of the sponsors of the newspaper ad. So I interviewed Joy Engel, who was the organizer of the ad, and she explained that this ad came about because parents were at a school bus stop and they decided they wanted to speak up in support of the referendum. And all the 7 couples contributed some money, and the total cost of the ad was $903. And the people who are listed in the ad are the people who paid for it. So the staff view of this particular ad is that it does state the names of the people who paid for the ad. They're the 7 couples who are listed at the bottom. I think that's beneficial for the public. The public can understand, who are the sponsors of this ad, but the advertisement does not include any address for the people involved. And that is a requirement in the law for this advertisement, because more than $500 was spent and it supports the referendum. So the commission staff recommendation with regard to this particular ad is that the commission finds there was a violation because no address was included, but that you not assess any monetary penalty. I can pause there, or I could go into the next one, however you want to proceed.
Go right ahead.
Okay. So the second one is another full-page ad, and it's entitled "Say Yes to S." And this was an ad that was organized by Mr. Krauser and a friend of his, Scott Mazuzan. And they reached out to a bunch of friends because they wanted to support both the referendum and these 3 candidates for local office. And they texted a bunch of people and they said, would you support signing on to this ad, and would you support, could you help us pay for the ad? And about 20 people said they would help pay. And that's, it was an effort by the 2 of them to try to speak out in favor of the referendum. And the cost was $1,128 that Mr. Krauser paid to the Cape Courier newspaper. So he can speak more to the factual circumstances. But the commission staff takes note of the fact that, there are more than 100 people listed here. Some 20 of them paid for it. There's no address in the ad. So the staff's conclusion after talking to Mr. Krauser was that this was a good faith effort. They were not aware of the requirement to state the name and the address of people who paid for the ad. Mr. Krauser can explain that he was relying on some advice from the newspaper and the publisher, and she was unaware of the requirements as well. So all in all, our recommendation is to say that this ad did not comply with the requirements, but we recommend not assessing a penalty for this ad either.
Thank you, Mr. Wayne. And there's also a claim that the group Advancing Cape Elizabeth Schools should have reported this as an in-kind contribution.
That's right. Thank you. That is something that Ms. Lynch is asking the commission to consider. Advancing Cape Elizabeth Schools is a well-funded and organized ballot question committee that is on file with us and filing campaign finance reports. One of the principal officers of the ballot question committee is Elizabeth Bierman. And she is one of the people who signed on to the ad among, 100 other people. And so Ms. Lynch is asking the commission to consider whether or not this is an in-kind contribution to advancing capability schools. But based on my interview of Mr. Krauser, he explains that they didn't do this at the request or suggestion of advancing Cape Elizabeth schools. They weren't coordinating with this ballot question committee. And my assessment is this is two guys who want to see this happen. And they reached out to their friends, and they had the same objective as advancing Cape Elizabeth schools. But I don't think there's enough evidence to conclude that it was intended as a gift to the ballot question committee. So I recommend taking no action on that allegation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wayne. Are there questions from commissioners for Mr. Wayne? Okay, we'll move on and hear from Mr. Krauser.
Okay, hi everyone. Do you just want me to kind of talk through how the ad came to be and all that, or are there specific things you want me to speak to?
I think from my perspective, I'd like to have you address the complaint, the items in the complaint that could be potential violations of statute. And
Okay.
I think that'll serve us well.
Sure, no problem. So as Mr. Wayne said, my friend Scott Mazuzin and I, we both live here in Cape Elizabeth, are supporters of the school saying yes to the school bond referendum that's happening on November 5th. We also are supporters of 3 of the town council candidates whose last names happen to start with S. Someone in town, and I genuinely don't remember how it came about, but put together that those 3 plus the school are all S's, so say yes to S. It's just a slogan that's been used to make it a little easier. People, I think there was an article in the Courier recently that blank votes have won out against most town council or school board vote, like for the candidates themselves in our town. So we just felt like this was like say yes to the S seems like a good way to hopefully engage people and get them to actually vote for our local officials. But anyway, so Scott and I texted a group of friends. I believe Scott reached out to a group of his friends in town, and we said, hey, we're putting this ad together. We basically said, you can help us, you can put your name on it and help us fund it. You can just help us fund it. You can just put your name on it, and we created the ad. Scott's wife actually put it together using Canva. We got names. We put the ad together. People, it is about 20 or so people. I said, just Venmo me the money and then I'll send the full payment to the Courier. So people Venmo'd me. And once we got to about the amount that was owed for the ad, that was it as far as people donating money. And we put the ad together and we ran it, and we did reach out to the Courier about the ad, and did email back and forth with Tara. Scott and I did, and we told her that it was a crowdfunded ad and there would be like at least 100. I think I want to say there's like 125 names on there. And that, we asked, do we need to put an email on there? And she said yes, and that we should be. I believe the email exchange with Tara says that we should be set if we put. I think she actually used the words, I would put an email in there to cover your bases. I'm paraphrasing, but I sent the email to Mr. Wayne, so I'm assuming y'all have seen it. And so we didn't realize that we had to put a physical address on there and specifically say that I sent the money to the Courier. I mean, when you break it down, I think it ends up being about $56 per person as far as the folks that actually donated money to fund the ad. And also, I mean, there are 100+ names on there. We felt like it was far from an anonymous ad as far as who is putting this together and doing it and supporting these 3 candidates and the school bond referendum votes. So as far as, I mean, do you want me to speak to the Advancing Cape Elizabeth stuff? I mean, we were not coordinated with them.
That's my question. My remaining question was if you were a part of that group or if you were doing this in coordination with them.
we were not doing it in coordination with ACES. This was a separate thing. And actually, I mean, I saw that Ms. Lynch sent you all some of the Courier in a physical copy with a handwritten note after she had emailed you. I don't know if she sent the whole paper, but if she did, you'd see that I believe there are 3 different ACES ads in there that have all the ACES information and are very clearly ads that ACES decided to run in that issue. So we it was not a coordinated effort. We didn't coordinate with ACES on running that ad. They didn't pay for any of it. I don't know.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Krauser. Are there questions from commissioners? Seeing none, I appreciate your input, Mr. Krauser. I think we have 3 questions to address here. The first is whether the first ad had the necessary disclaimer on it. It's the one with the fewer names. And I'll move that the ad did not have the proper disclaimer, but that we issue no penalty because this is a fairly new statute and people are just learning about it. Is there a second? Is there discussion? Okay, we'll call for a vote. Commissioner Ahern?
Yes.
Commissioner Leclerc?
Yes.
Commissioner Hastings?
Yes.
Commissioner Marble?
Yes.
And I'll also vote yes. The next question is whether the second ad similarly was missing the disclosure required. That's the one with the 125 names or so. And I will move that it did not have the disclosure required, but that again, it was unintentional and there was no attempt to hide the sponsors. So I'll recommend no penalty. Is there a second? I'm sorry,
I'll second that.
Thank you, Commissioner Marble. Is there discussion? Yes, Commissioner.
Just very briefly, the problem of getting the public to understand this, one of the avenues of helping would probably be to notify newspapers like this, who obviously were trying to do the right thing and had improper information. So going forward, that might be an avenue to notify the public about the requirements of this laws through the actual publications like this that distribute them.
I think that's a very wise suggestion. I'm sure Mr. Wayne heard that.
I did, and there's got to be some sort of association of newspapers that we could work with, try to get the word out about that.
Great idea. Great idea. Okay, so we'll move. Did we vote on that?
No.
Not yet.
No.
Okay, Commissioner Leclerc.
Yes.
Commissioner Ahern.
Yes.
Commissioner Marble.
Yes.
Commissioner Hastings.
Yes.
And I'll also vote yes. And the last question on this issue is whether we should take any more action on whether this was done as an in-kind contribution to advancing Cape Elizabeth schools. And I will move that we take no further action on this. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, is there discussion? We'll move to a vote. Commissioner Leclerc?
Yes.
Commissioner Ahern?
Sorry, yes.
Commissioner Hastings?
Yes.
Commissioner Marble?
Yes.
And I'll also vote yes. So thank you, Mr. Krauser, for coming to help us. And we'd appreciate it if you'll help get the word out that that kind of a disclaimer is required on those kinds of ads.
Yes, I will. And I'm sure I will send Tara at the Courier an email so that she is 100% aware. But thank you all for your time and thank you all for what you're doing. It is very much appreciated. And I hope you all have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Bye.
Okay, there's an item that we just got, I think last night or this morning, regarding the Auburn Democratic City Committee. And I think we can take that up as another business item if there's no objection from commissioners. Is there anyone there, Mr. Wayne, to address this?
We we may have up to 2 or 3 people who might participate online on this. One, the complainant, and then 1 or 2 representatives from the Democratic Committee of Auburn.
Okay. Are they doing it by Zoom?
Yeah, this would all be online, and we're trying to have them join right now.
Okay, great. Mr. Berdur and Mr. Titcomb, you are here to address this Auburn Democrat City Committee question. You're both muted.
Yes.
Okay, terrific. Are we expecting anybody else to appear?
Mike Polk may come, but he's working.
Okay.
So,
So we're free to go ahead with you guys here.
yes.
Okay, great. So the normal.
Sorry. So I apologize for jumping in there. There's been a Mr. Ken McAuliffe who's joined the meeting, and we actually are confused about which agenda item he's interested in. As the best of my knowledge, it does not pertain to this. Mr. Berdur, do you know Ken McAuliffe? Is he related to the committee at all, or Mr. Titcomb? Is he a part of it?
No, not as far as I know.
Yeah, hello.
Hi, Mr. McAuliffe.
Yes, I'm Ken McAuliffe, and I was interested, and it may be too late because of other things this morning, the issue regarding York and the Wiggly Bridge Distillery. Has that been already decided?
Yes, we disposed of that fairly early in the meeting.
Okay, my apologies. I'm
No
sorry,
problem.
I was not able to get on the call, so I'm sorry. I apologize for taking up your time.
No problem at all.
All right, thank you, sir.
Okay, so this other business item, the way we normally handle these is we have Mr. Wayne give us a little factual background, and then we'll hear from you guys, and then we'll make a decision. So, Mr. Wayne.
This relates to a posting, or maybe you could call it an advertisement that involves some expense, and it was positioned and promoted on Facebook, and it was paid for by the Auburn Democratic City Committee. And it consists of a 8-second video about that is critical of Laurel Libby, who's the Republican nominee for District 90. And then it also contains a message above the video that says, vote Coach Dan Campbell on November 5th. And then at the top of the posting, it says Auburn City Democrats. So the complaint was filed by Alex Titcomb. He can speak to his concerns, but I understood them to conclude who really paid for this, was Mr. Campbell involved, was there an independent expenditure report filed, and then is the disclaimer on the ad does it fully comply with the requirements. From the staff point of view, you know, the committee has barely had a chance to respond to this, but our preliminary point of view is that the ad does not actually contain all of the required information because the address of the committee is not in there. And we think it was required to include the message not paid for, authorized by any candidate. We think that was feasible to include that in the posting. We may just have been joined by Michael Polk, who's the individual involved in the Auburn committee that actually was involved in paying for the ad and arranging for the ad. So he would have, after you're from Mr. Titcomb, if that's your choice, I think Mr. Polk would be the person who's best positioned to talk about the circumstances of the posting.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions from commissioners for Mr. Wayne?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for point of clarification, this is not about posting something on Facebook. It's about paying Facebook to distribute it in whatever way that they decide to distribute things. It's a paid advertisement that just happens to be on a social media app. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, I'm sorry if I didn't express myself well. That is my understanding. This is in effect an ad because there was a payment of $39.83 by the Democratic Committee to get this promoted. So I guess, I'm not that familiar with Facebook myself. I don't participate, but I think it'd be legitimately be called an ad that was paid for by the committee.
Thank you.
Are there other questions from commissioners for Mr. Wayne? Okay, seeing none. Mr. Titcomb, you brought the complaint. Would you like to address us?
Sure. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right. Thanks so much for your time this morning, almost afternoon. I know it might seem a small matter to you guys, but I have great respect for all of you and the commission, and also personally, I'm not a huge fan of a lot of these legal requirements for disclosures paid for by disclaimers. So that's, just a personal statement. But if we are if we are all in agreement that we want the public, it to be transparent, and the public should have a right to know who's behind political advertisements for or against candidates, then no matter if it's $30 expenditure or a $30,000 expenditure that I'm doing, it should be, the law should be upheld evenly across the board. And so that's why on the public view, we didn't know how much is being spent.
You're kind of dropping out, Mr.
You can only see that, if I was to look on Facebook, I can see spent. Right, with my video off. Sorry, I'm in a car using my phone Wi-Fi. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so so I didn't know how much was spent on this ad, so that's why I posed the question to the ethics staff in regards to see if they were spending $250 or more, which would have triggered a IE report. The dollars spent that they've said right now isn't really the full cost yet, so we're not even sure about what is the committed financial expense is. They reported the cost of what they've paid to date. It looks like they're boosting maybe around $50 per ad, and there's 2 of them. So there's a higher cost there. And I just wanted to ask you guys just to, make sure that we hold all folks accountable to the same law in regards to these disclosures, if we agree with them or not.
And thank you, Mr. Titcomb. We appreciate you bringing the complaint. I see Mr. Brodeur and Mr. Polk. Who would like to go first from the respondent's point of view?
I believe Mike has all the information.
Okay, great. Mr. Polk,
just trying to unmute myself there. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Excellent. Thank you, the commission, for having us here. Thank you also for adjudicating this matter in such a timely fashion. Really impressed that it all happened in looks like about less than 24 hours here. And thank you to
We have
Mr.
an amazing staff.
I'm telling you, man. I was like, I got an email at 9 o'clock at night. This is something here. Hardest working people in Maine government. And thank you to Mr. Titcomb and our opponent's campaign for bringing this issue so that we can make sure that we, as a party committee, are promoting candidates who we support, and also getting out the message to voters in a way that is completely transparent and that is abiding by all Maine state statutes. The question posed by Commissioner Leclerc at the start, it's a little bit complicated, but I do think it's worth addressing that the way that Meta Platforms, who owns Facebook and Instagram, conducts targeted advertising is that we create a post. We're creating posts very regularly about issues in the community and races. And then they give you an option whether you want to then promote that post using dollar amount in order to expand the reach of people who you may or may not reach otherwise. So that is the case in this instant, but I think for the sake of the commission, it is fair to call this an ad. And there is a lot of individual disclosure that has to be conducted on the part of an advertiser, specifically for a social media company like Meta Platforms, including things like identity and location verification and so forth. So we went through a lot as a committee to get to the point where they would accept our dollars basically to promote posts, to support and oppose candidates. And also, we were very, very focused on trying to make sure that there was a clear line of demarcation between our committee and any individual candidates or their campaigns. But that being said, after the complaint was made and reading through the recommendations of the staff, which were sent early this morning, I, speaking personally, and I also would hope for the committee, agree with the recommendations of staff that this was not intentional, but we'd be more than happy to make a modification to this post or ad to make sure that it very clearly states that that this is not paid for by any candidate or any candidates committee. That's a change that that can be made and is very easy to do, and we are happy to do so to make sure that we are in full compliance.
Thank you, Mr. Polk. I appreciate it. Are there questions from commissioners for Mr. Polk?
I have one pretty simple one.
Sure.
When this content starts as a post, is it clear to the reader that it says Democratic Committee or Auburn City Democrats?
It is incredible. It is very clear.
And does that change when it's boosted or whatever else? Or is that still there?
It's in addition to saying that it was created under the Auburn City Democrats Facebook page, there is also a line that says paid for by the Auburn Democratic City Committee, and it says sponsored next to the post. And there are some examples which have been attached in the correspondence that I had with Mr. Wayne that you can be referenced, where you can see highlighted those examples of where it shows who posted it and who paid for it to be promoted.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? Commissioner Leclerc, did you have a question?
Just another clarification. You mentioned that in order to promote what you call promote a post on Facebook, you'd need to provide information to the Meta platform.
That's correct. This is the company that owns the platforms Facebook, Instagram, and others.
And how readily accessible is that disclosure available to the public? Like if somebody saw that ad, saw it was the Auburn Democrats, could they have access to that information themselves without any real difficulty?
Well, yes, they can access it. Whether there is real difficulty or not, I think that would be up to the individual to be able to decide whether they thought it was difficult or not. I certainly have had plenty of frustrations myself dealing with Meta Platforms and the labyrinthine menus and settings that they make you jump through in order to find the information you're looking for. Perhaps Mr. Titcomb can speak to how easy it was to find our ads manager, but it is possible. In my personal opinion, it is not easy, and I wish that they would make it easier.
Thank you.
Are there other questions from commissioners for Mr. Polk? Okay, seeing none. Mr. Berdeur, would you like to add anything?
Just that this was done by our city committee after all those who were involved in individual campaigns that left the committee. So it was done by those individuals who were not involved in any campaigns at all.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Are there questions from commissioners for Mr. Berdeur? Okay, seeing none.
One other issue. A maximum of $100 was budgeted for this particular ad.
Okay, thank you. I think as a introductory matter, I'd like to say that Mr. Polk made the offer to include the required disclosures on the ad immediately, and I think that would be a great idea. I will move that we find that there was a violation of 21A MRS section 1014-2 because it did not include the required disclosures. But I don't think there was any attempt to hide the sponsor. I think it was clear to everybody who the sponsor was, so I would recommend not assessing a fine. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, great. Is there discussion amongst commissioners? Seeing none, I'll move to a vote. Commissioner Leclerc. You're muted.
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Ahern?
Yes.
Commissioner Marble?
Yes.
Commissioner Hastings?
Yes.
And I'll also vote yes. And thank you, gentlemen, for bringing this to our attention and for filling us in and helping us make the decision.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 6. That's the proposed changes to Maine campaign finance law. Mr. Wayne, is there still nobody present who wishes to address this?
That's correct.
Okay. Have all the commissioners had a chance to take a look at this? I did, and I think all the changes that I looked at were, I think, wise and informed changes, and so particularly the provision to increase the penalties for cutouts and trying to hide the sources of funds, because that's something that really annoyed us in a couple of cases recently, and it was just beyond the pale when we saw organizations using cutouts to try to finance a campaign and hide the sources of the actual sources of the funds. It's just so clearly intentional and wrong. I agree with increasing the penalties. The $5,000 penalty that's available now is, somebody could consider that a cost of doing business. So I think that's a particularly wise change. Does anybody have anything else in the changes that they'd like to discuss?
I have just agreement with your comments and support of the staff work.
Thank you, Commissioner Marble.
And I guess I just want to add that you can tell by reading this, a lot of work went into this, and I really appreciate the staff doing the work that they did.
Yep. You'll find that we have just a magnificent staff, and we're very, very lucky.
Which is one of the reasons I said that I wanted to be on this, because that staff has just been extraordinary throughout my career.
Well, see, they should be happy because we now have a 5th outstanding member of the commission. So, Mr. Wayne, would you like us to vote to proceed with these proposed changes?
That would be great if the commission has had adequate time to consider this. We'd love to submit this particular bill to the revisor's office so they can get working on it. And thank you also for the comments. Appreciate it.
I think that's entirely in order. Is everybody prepared to do that? I would move that we direct the staff to submit these proposed changes for the next legislative session.
And I just want to add that there's plenty of time. I don't know of any piece of legislation that has ever come out exactly the way it went in.
Exactly right.
So I know that there'll be time for more edits. So
Yes. And in looking through this, and having been a former legislator, I can see some things that there might be some upset about. So I think the chances of this going exactly as it's written is probably near zero.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Marble. Is there further discussion? Okay, we'll call for a vote. Commissioner Ahern?
Yes.
Commissioner Leclerc?
Yes.
Commissioner Marble?
Yes.
Commissioner Hastings?
Yes.
And I'll also vote yes. And so, thank you all so much. I think we've gotten through quite the agenda today. And it was only because of you guys zeroing in on the issues and handling everything wisely. So thank you very much.
Mr. Chair,
yes.
May I take a moment just to make one comment?
You may.
I don't have the clarity I had whenever this meeting began, but I want to attempt to embarrass Mr. Bolton just in a moment. I did listen to oral arguments a week or two ago, and I have to say that I was impressed with a number of things, but the two that came to mind were his clear grasp of the facts and his grace under pressure. And I sat very appreciative that he was a link representing us in this matter, and also for how well he represented the citizens of Maine and that what they stated in that referendum. So I just wanted to thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Hear, hear. And I'll just echo that and say that we're very fortunate to have Mr. Bolton advising us on the law. He's done us a great service.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So, go ahead.
Wow. Mr. Chair, could I introduce a new staff member with that to the commission members? Would that be okay?
That would be lovely.
Thanks. I don't know how if she pipes up, well, maybe the camera will focus on her, but
Do you want me to sit in the hot seat?
yes, please. We hired Heidi Hepler to join our staff. She is an attorney by training, and she's worked as a staff attorney for departments within Maine state government and Massachusetts state government, and prior to that, worked as a staff attorney for different financial services companies. And we're just delighted that she applied for the position and has accepted it. And she's bright, analytical, effervescent, and a great member of our staff. And we're just really glad she's here.
Which position is that, Jonathan?
So this is the political committee and the lobbyist registrar that used to be held by Emma Berg. And so the person in this position keeps track of the political action committees and the party committees and the lobbyists, and moreover helps them out, gives them the information they need to do the right thing. And so it's a critical position, and we're delighted that someone with Heidi's professional background joined us.
That's awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wayne. Thank you, Heidi, for joining us. It sounds like we're going to be well served by applying your expertise.
Hopefully, I'm very glad to be here. So, and it was nice to attend my first commission meeting. And again, I'm just very happy to be here. So,
and we're glad to have you.
Mr. Chair, I was very happy to learn. I don't think we've met before, but we spoke a little while ago when Heidi grew up in Freiburg, my hometown, and we both attended Freiburg Academy. So
oh, that's terrific.
You probably attended it 35 years before Heidi did.
Much before Heidi.
Years used to write on stone tablets, right? Well, thank you for Heidi for joining us. We really look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
And is there a commissioner who'd like to make the motion that never fails?
I move we adjourn.
I second it.
All right. There's no discussion of that allowed, so let's go straight to a vote. Commissioner LeClaire?
Yes.
Commissioner Hearn?
Yes.
Commissioner Hastings?
Yes.
Commissioner Marble?
Yes.
And I'll also vote yes. So once again, thank you all for being here and being such great commissioners.
Thank you.
Thank you, and feel better.
Yeah.
I'll do my darndest. I'm not going to talk for the rest of the day.
Bye.
Bye.